Hey guys, picture this. You've just woken up in the steamy jungle of ancient Mesoamerica. Birds screech, monkeys howl, and mosquitoes the size of your nightmares are chanting your name. You're about to discover the pantheon of gods who ruled over life, death, corn, chocolate, rain, and yes, human sacrifice. And spoiler alert, they're not offering you a lollipop for lunch. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Let's kick things off with the head honcho himself, Itzamna. Pronounced Itzamna if you want to sound like you've got your life together. Itzumna if you're aiming for extra confusion. Itzamna is the creator god, the cosmic grandpa rocking the universe like it's his lounge chair. He's part medicine man, part sky god, and part patron of scribes. Basically the Mayan version of a Renaissance man, minus the mustache wax and juggling skills. Legend says he taught humans how to write, probably because someone had to draft those sticky law contracts demanding more hearts on the altar. Yet, for all his cosmic importance, Itzamna was more of an absentee landlord. He hung out in the heavens sipping ambrosia, or whatever the Mayan equivalent of ambient fungus tea was, and left the daily grind to his sweatiest offspring. Enter Chaac, god of rain and thunder. Imagine a deity who holds all the water on earth hostage, demanding regular ceremonies and dance routines to coax those precious clouds into spilling their guts. Chaac is essentially the world's crankiest weatherman. No rain? He's sulking in a cloudless timeout. Too much rain? He's throwing a temper tantrum with lightning bolts and floods until you beg for mercy. Farmers either worshipped him like a rock star, or feared him like a teenager fears the math teacher's pop quizzes. Next up, the moon goddess, Ixchel. She's equal parts nurturing mother and psychotic scarecrow. Talk about mood swings. At one moment she's blessing women in childbirth, good vibes only. The next she's brewing toxins that send your local midwife into a panic. She had two faces. One sweet and round like a full moon, the other decrepit and toothless like the leftovers in your office fridge. Ladies loved her for her fertility powers. Men prayed she'd stick to the moonlight and keep her potions to herself. Meanwhile, down on earth, corn was king. Literally, because without corn, you're basically a walking stomach vacuum. So the Maya worshipped Yum Kaax, god of wild vegetation and guardian of maize fields. Picture a lanky forest hermit wearing a coat made of grass, wielding a staff that looks suspiciously like a cornstalk. He'd guard your crops from raccoons, locusts, and the occasional neighbor trying to steal a few ears. Offer him a bit of corn, and you'd avoid famine. Forget him, and you'd be chewing on bark and regrets. But if you thought corn gods were chill, wait until you meet Pooch, the lord of the underworld. He's basically death by 11 unpleasant methods. Skeletal, reeking of decay, draped in owls and vultures fashion. Pooch presided over Mitnal, the Mayan equivalent of IKEA basement with a twist of eternal torment. His hobbies included prescribing curses, hoarding lost souls, and keeping the local ghost population from unionizing. If Itzamna is absentee landlord, Pooch is the overzealous building inspector who shows up uninvited at 6 a.m. to measure your foundation. But let's not ignore the real party animals. The hero twins, Hunahpu and Xibalba. Imagine two brothers who have to outwit 7 death gods in a cosmic poker game. Except the stakes are, your cannon fodder flatmate gets turned into a pool of blood. They lost the first round, got themselves sacrificed and beheaded, but used their disembodied heads to trick the underworld bosses into a fatal sneeze. After that, they got resurrected and became the ultimate cosmic pranksters. They even popped up as the sun and the moon, like a celestial buddy comedy you never asked for. Speaking of buddy comedies, the maize god himself, known as Hunahpu, father to the twins, was a literal embodiment of your breakfast burrito. He died, sprouted from a scepter-carrying stalk at the bottom of a well, and rose triumphant, clutching his cob of glory. His rebirth symbolized spring, renewal, and, hey, you get corn again this year. The Maya took this so seriously, they built temples shaped like massive corn shafts. You know, architectural subtlety was not their strong suit. Of course, no godly meeting is complete without a drama queen or two. Take Ixtab, goddess of intoxication and the arts. Legend says she introduced pulque, the beloved fermented agave juice, to humans and then promptly got angry when everyone passed out at parties. She swooped down like an ancient bouncer, hauling away those who overdid the tequila shots to her waterfalls of oblivion. Accurate myth or drunk friend's tall tale? You decide. Meanwhile, Ixtab, no relation, ruled over suicide. That's right, a goddess who specialized in peaceful departures. She'd hang out on a tree branch, waiting for people who can't stand their earthly paycheck bullshit any longer. But here's the twist. With Ixtab, the Maya believed those souls got VIP tours in the afterlife. So if you committed ritual hanging, you got a cushy ride instead of Apuch's basement. Talk about a weird HR policy. Now, let's talk sex, because Mayan gods did not shy away. Chaac, the aforementioned moon goddess's alternate persona, ran a brothel in the heavens. Visitors included gods seeking discreet one-night affairs and hapless mortals trying to earn divine favor. Contracts were verbal and binding, guaranteed to land you in favor or front row seats at a ceremonial death. Shopper beware. On the more respectable side, there was Chaac Xibalba. No, that's not a typo. It's the dark mirror of our rain god, Chaac. He ruled over Xibalba, the underworld, and collected tributes in the form of hearts and human screams. Mortals who angered him got flourishings of mudslides and curses stronger than your grandma's cleaning vinegar. By now, your head might be spinning faster than a sacrificial knife. But hold on, we're not done. The Maya had deities for practically everything. The spider goddess Ixchel's husband, a weaver turned scarecrow. Ekchua, patron of merchants and cacao smugglers. And Yopat, a storm god brandishing thunderbolts shaped like clubs. Because who needs lightning when you can club the sky? Which brings us to the ritual calendar. Because if you think juggling 12 months was hard, the Maya managed 18 months of 20 days each, plus a nameless death week, where time literally stopped. Cue the existential dread. Each day had its patron, each month its festival, each year its prophecy. Get the timing wrong, and you'd accidentally summon Yopat during harvest. Guess who'd be drenched in lightning and ripe tomatoes? Let's illustrate with a personal anecdote. Imagine being a lowly scribe named Kienich. You've spent your entire career painstakingly carving glyphs into stone, only to discover you misdated the month by one day. Next thing you know, you're standing in a pit chanting apologies to the rain god as your neighbor smirks. Fun. But hey, at least the gods kept things interesting. While the Romans had Jupiter yawning in the sky, the Maya deities were hosting soap operas of betrayal, resurrection, and drunken revelries in the heavens. It was like binge-watching Game of Thrones, except with more feathers, less nudity, and an ongoing risk of literal sacrifice. And sacrifice they did. Hearts on altars, headless captives, pools of blood, none of it optional. Why? Because without blood, the sun might skip its daily commute, crops would shrivel, and your vitamin D levels would plummet. A small price to pay for breakfast tortillas. So there you have it. Gods who create, gods who destroy, gods who party, and gods who keep meticulous records of your fatal mistakes, all to maintain cosmic balance. If you thought your boss was demanding, imagine Chaac with lightning shards. In the next segment, we'll dissect the most notorious rituals, reveal how local villagers trained for God-pleasing dance-offs, and uncover the love triangle that almost ended the world. Spoiler: one god ends up with a migraine the size of a cenote. Stay tuned, mortals, because part 2 is coming soon, and trust me, you'd rather face 1,000 mosquitoes than miss it. Remember that love triangle I promised? Well, buckle up. This one involves a jealous rain god, a puppet master sun deity, and a goddess who's one grudge away from unleashing cataracts on the entire region. But first, let's talk rituals. Because the Maya turned ceremonies into the world's most high-stakes reality show, training for the ultimate dance-off. Imagine signing up for So You Think You Can Please Chaac, and realizing your audition involves stepping barefoot on burning coals. Villagers began practicing months in advance, limbering up like yogis on espresso and memorizing steps that looked suspiciously like interpretive octopus motion. Every wiggle and stomp was choreographed to imitate the rumble of thunder, the drumbeat of distant lightning, and the hiss of an impending downpour. Miss one beat and you'd risk summoning the rain god's wrath instead of his blessing. Cue the floodwaters and immediate membership in the neighborhood morgue. Bloodletting, the ultimate self-care. Forget bubble baths and scented candles. Mayan elites swore by self-inflicted cuts to win divine favor. They'd slice their tongues, ears, or genitals with stingray spines or obsidian blades and catch the dripping blood on paper or bark, which was then burned as the god's favorite incense. Why? Because apparently, "Hey gods, here's some of my literal life juice, please don't let it flood," was a more convincing prayer than, "Dear gods, if you could just send one good rain cloud, that'd be great." Physicians, if you could call shamans, physicians, carried tiny napkins for rapid dab-ups, and probably therapy notes for the villagers who regretted ever believing that star-shaped ritual scar would become a TikTok trend in 2025. Human Sacrifice, the grim series finale. Sure, self-bloodletting was intense, but it was merely appetizer. The main course, offering a live human heart, still beating, to keep the universe from lapsing into cosmic timeout. Victims, often war captives, were paraded up temple pyramids like contestants on America's Next Top Sacrifice, wearing only loincloths and that deer in headlights expression. Priests, decked out in jaguar skins and owl feathers, used obsidian blades to slit open chests with the precision of surgeons, minus the anesthetic, comforting small talk and malpractice lawsuits. The heart was hurled at the feet of the deity statue, and the body tumbled down the pyramid steps, landing in a cavern where the local buzzards held tailgate parties. The festival of the sowing maize. In the 4th month of the sacred year, villagers celebrated the festival of the sowing maize. They danced around clay figures of the maize god while reenacting his death and resurrection, because nothing says happy farming quite like staging a literal mock execution. You'd see farmers wearing corn husk masks, pretending to collapse, only to sprout again when the drums hit the crescendo. Then they'd toss kernels into the soil, believing the reenacted death of Hunhunapu would guarantee the rebirth of real corn. If the reenactment sucked, no flair, no drama, no convincing corpse vibes, they risked a real crop failure. Imagine Oscar backlash, but the prize is famine. Xibalba's board games. Down in Xibalba, the underworld, the gods reportedly played ball games and board games with mortal champions. The classic ball game involved a rubber ball, a stone hoop set high on a wall, and body parts, hips, shoulders, and sometimes heads, that couldn't touch the ball. The winner was celebrated, the loser was sometimes sacrificed. Some theories argue the winning team was executed to send their more honored spirits to the afterlife as VIPs. Talk about sacrificing your front runners. They also played Patoli, a dice and marker board game. The stakes? Usually land, slaves, or lives. If you lost your cornfields for rolling snake eyes, you learned geometry pretty fast. Namely, the angle at which to dive off a temple staircase. The love triangle. Sun versus rain versus moon. Picture the sun god, Kinich Ahau, lounging on his luminous throne, basking in adoration from dawn until noon. He's the type to drop selfies from the sky. Beam us up, Scotty meets Instagram. Enter Chaac, the rain god, who's tired of playing second fiddle. Sure, sun god, everyone loves you. Big surprise, you turn day into daytime. But who keeps their corn alive? Me. Meanwhile, Ixchel sits on a bench weaving blankets, texting both gods behind their backs. Kinich, your rays give me heat rash, she tweets. Then to Chaac, your storms give me jet lag. One afternoon, Chaac drenches Kinich in a surprise downpour to prove a point, and Kinich retaliates by blasting a heatwave so fierce, villagers thought the sun was auditioning for a dragon. Cue Ixchel dramatically tearing her weaving apart. I wanted calm skies to finish this blanket, she wails. Thus began a divine custody battle for the moon, because apparently even ancient deities couldn't agree on who got full-time lunar rights. Temple pyramids, ancient skyscrapers. Mayan pyramids were the original skyscrapers, minus elevators with an express lane to heart removal. Climbing 9, 12, even 20 tiers in the blistering sun was an open call for leg cramps and existential dread. Priests would ascend daily to perform rituals, wave incense, and shout into the void, "Yo gods, remember us?" Meanwhile, onlookers below hoped the sun god didn't decide altitude training was overrated and roast everyone at 200 meters above ground. There was also the constant fear of kingly inscriptions. In year 9 Ahal, we captured 37 souls, climb 13 tiers, sacrifice one champion, etched in stone, visible to future generations. Imagine your LinkedIn profile for eternity. Job, pyramid climber. Achievement, one ceremonial defeat. The prophecy of the nameless days. Between the 18th and 1st months lurked Wayeb, 5 dreaded nameless days that existed outside the protection of the calendar. Time itself took a break. No one ventured far from home for fear of slipping into temporal limbo. Even the gods apparently hit the pause button. Villagers sat by candlelight, trembling at every creak in the walls, convinced they'd be zapped into oblivion. Some believed that during the Wayeb, your reflection might wander off on its own. So if you saw yourself washing dishes, you assumed your doppelganger was out partying at Xibalba's club. VIP only, no mortal access. Cooking with the gods. The Maya believed that sharing a meal with a deity strengthened bonds, so naturally they invited them to cookouts. Stews of venison, tamales stuffed with turkey, and chocolate drinks flavored with chili were arranged on altars. Priests would raise their bowls skyward, chanting, "Eat up, O mighty gods," then sip from their own. A misstep, like burning the turkey, meant the gods would arrive with extra hot indigestion, manifesting as drought. Meanwhile, villagers on the ground wondered why the best chef in town, Aunt Ixkik, was never invited. Divination, by scrying pots in jade, need to forecast the future? Forget your phone's weather app. Maya diviners used water-filled pots, jade pebbles, and bird entrails. They'd scatter jade stones on a mat. An auspicious pattern meant prosperity, while a cluster in one corner signaled impending war. For more dramatic effects, they'd toss a sheep's liver into the pot and inspect its floating shape. Because nothing says, "I see tragedy in our future," like a soggy organ. Today, we worry about Wi-Fi outages. They worried about jaguars in their stew. The climactic love triangle duel. Back to our love triangle. The final showdown was set atop a pyramid during an eclipse. Naturally, they timed it so your smartphone camera wouldn't catch the moment. Kinich Ahau arrived, radiating arrogant sunlight. Chaac thundered in with storm clouds and a lightning bolt as his mic dropped. Ixchel perched between them, weaving a tapestry of both light and rain. They dueled, lightning versus sunbeams, while the villagers held their breath. At the last second, Ixchel severed the skies with a full moon, plunging the stage into silvery twilight. She declared, "I'll have solar days, rainy nights, and moonlit neither," and thus established the alternating calendar of wet and dry seasons. Aftermath, the birth of the seasonal calendar. Because no battle is complete without bureaucratic paperwork, the gods codified their truce into a seasonal calendar. 6 months wet, 6 months dry, sprinkled with divine holidays. Farmers could finally plan planting and harvesting without involuntary sacrifices to correct scheduling errors. Meanwhile, temple scribes updated glyphs. Inaugural eclipse duel, June 23rd, year 12 AHA, ensuring everyone remembered who won custody of the seasons. By now, you're probably wondering, how did the Maya keep all this straight without Excel? The answer, they didn't. They lived in a glorious state of cosmic chaos, trusting that ceremonies, sacrifices, and the occasional divine love triangle would keep the universe from unraveling. And honestly, if your existence hinges on dancing barefoot on hot stones and impaling your ear, maybe you'll appreciate your smartphone's calendar reminders a bit more. In part 3, we'll examine the most outrageous temple frescoes, spoiler, monkeys and togas, unmask the undercover cacao smugglers, and reveal the hidden scandal that almost toppled the city of Polanco. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around, because unlike the gods, I'm not going anywhere. Let's dive headfirst into the hallucinatory world of Mayan temple frescoes, where monkeys sport togas, jaguars moonlight as record keepers, and every splash of pigment hides a juicy piece of gossip. Outrageous temple frescoes step into a Mayan temple chamber and prepare to question your sanity. The walls are a riot of color. Deep reds of spilled sacrificial wine, electric blues of Quetzal feathers, and shocking yellows that might have been invented just to make visiting Spaniards faint. In one panel, you'll catch a troop of capuchin monkeys wearing crisp white togas. No, this isn't a toga party tribute. It's a satirical jab at a rival city-state. Legend has it, these monkeys represent the elite of Dos Pilas, forever mocked for trying to emulate the grandeur of Tikal. In another scene, a jaguar scribe holds a giant quill, furiously etching glyphs into stone, because clearly felines made better historians than humans. But the real head-scratcher appears on the ceiling vaults, humans dancing with disembodied hearts. Picture villagers shimmying, mid-riff scarlet with blood, while ghostly hearts orbit above like macabre disco balls. Artists rendered these scenes with such precision, you can almost hear the drums calling, and feel the sticky spray of sacrificial gore. The frescoes weren't decorative, they were visual press releases. If you were a peasant passing by, one look and you'd think, better pay my taxes now, or end up in this wall art forever. Of course, there was a political edge. Each mural doubled as propaganda, show fearsome rituals, advertise your city's divine approval, and warn invaders that your sacrificial knife game was world class. Archaeologists still debate whether some frescoes were fan art, by freelance painters hoping to win temple commissions. Either way, these walls screamed holy terror, and showcased a jaw-dropping level of dark humor. Undercover cacao smugglers. While priests argued theology in lofty chambers, a secret network of cacao smugglers thrived in the city's shadows. Cocoa beans were the ancient equivalent of gold bars, so of course crafty merchants formed clandestine chocolate cartels. These smugglers used hollowed-out gourds, reed rafts, and yes, even flat-faced turtles as Trojan horses to ferry precious beans. Past tax collectors. One famous ring, dubbed El Clan del Ardilla, the Squirrel Clan, dressed scouts in rodent costumes, complete with tail and whiskers, to slip through checkpoint gates. When guards saw a harmless squirrel scuttling by, they barely looked twice. Meanwhile, merchants in hidden alcoves ground beans into a paste so potent it could double as dating advice. One sip and you're smooth enough to woo Ixchel herself. The wealthiest smugglers built private cacao granaries beneath their homes, rigged with trapdoors that dumped trespassers into karst cave pits. Legend has it, some smugglers became so rich they commissioned custom-carved cacao stelae, columns celebrating their service to chocolate. Talk about taking brand evangelism to the next level. Naturally, the gods got involved. Chua, patron of merchants and cacao thieves, was worshipped in back alley shrines hidden behind elaborate murals. Smugglers sacrificed fowl, poured chocolate libations, and prayed for safe passage. Insiders believe that Chua's jagged nose symbolized his nose for profit. If you heard a distant tropical bird call at night, you might just be in the presence of his spirit, checking your cargo manifests. The hidden scandal that almost toppled Palenque. Now, let's unearth the juiciest rumor of all, the conspiracy that nearly shattered Palenque's throne. In the waning years of King Chan Bahlam II's reign, whispers spread of a secret faction, the Order of the Obsidian Mirror. This clandestine society claimed divine mandate to expose the king's sins, and apparently specialized in heart-shaped black, mirrors used for scrying royal misdeeds. It began with a minor glyph discrepancy. Temple scribes noticed that certain inscriptions announcing a bountiful harvest were altered, corn ears replaced by empty husks. Citizens started murmuring that the king hoarded grain in secret silos, selling it to neighboring city-states at inflated prices. Fueled by dried bean indignation, commoners joined the order. By the time Chan Bahlam II returned from a diplomatic tour, half the city's statues had new carvings. Down with Hunger King. The year's sacred festival nearly erupted into a full-blown riot. The turning point came during the ceremony of stones. Holders of the obsidian mirror gathered beneath the main pyramid at midnight, their reflective discs flashing in torchlight. They proclaimed they would reveal the king's true face, literally if he didn't abdicate. Palace guards stormed the scene, but the mirrors disintegrated in the moonlight, rendering the rebels blindfolded by broken glass and superstition. King Chan Bahlam II played his final card, divine intervention. At dawn, priests ascended the pyramid, chanting that the sun itself appeared crimson, an omen of betrayal. The frightened populace believed the gods sided with the king. In the ensuing panic, order members were forced to kneel on crushed jade beads, a particularly painful ritual of penance, and publicly recant their accusations. The rebellion fizzled and Palenque's rule continued, albeit with an unspoken understanding. Never question the corn or the crown, artistic innovations and hidden meanings. The fresco artists, smugglers, and conspirators all shared a gift for symbolism. Take the recurring motif of the feathered serpent weaving through frescoes, Kukulkan by one name, Quetzalcoatl by another. He slinked between scenes of sacrifice and celebration, reminding viewers of life's dual nature. Archaeologists found hidden templates in dilapidated temples, tiny glyph instructions scribbled beneath layers of pigment, like an artist's first sketch. Some suggest these underdrawings contain subversive messages, cryptic jokes that only trained eyes could decipher. Even the placement of frescoes carried hidden codes. Chambers painted in cool blue hues were reserved for female deities. Fiery reds marked masculine sanctuaries. Ceremonial corridors used alternating colors to guide participants on a psychological journey. Enter expecting fear, then relief, then confusion, and finally awe. Imagine a medieval funhouse designed by performance artists who believe in cosmic terror. That was the Mayan temple experience in a nutshell. The cacao code, secret recipes, and ritual blends. Beyond smuggling, cacao's transformation into ritual beverages was a guarded secret. Priests mixed beans with water, ash, chili, and honey, then poured the frothy drink from high jugs to activate the spirit of flavor. Documents recovered on bark paper describe codified measurements: 2 handfuls of chili for courage, 3 drops of honey for eloquence, and a pinch of ash for protection against scorpion stings. The most coveted blend, called Blood of the Moon, required beans harvested under a lunar eclipse, an event so rare it triggered citywide festivities. Smugglers quickly caught on and sold counterfeit batches dyed with beetroot juice. Devotees biting into these fake brews would hallucinate swirling jackal-headed gods. When the real ceremonial cup arrived, genuine sippers felt, according to inscriptions, a spiritual handshake with the maize god himself. Early tourists, visiting envoys, wrote letters home describing the chocolate-induced visions, fueling a centuries-long fascination that eventually became Mayan chocolate tourism light. Why this matters today? You might be lounging in your sea-blazed apartment, sipping a mocha latte from a corner cafe, thinking, surely I escaped this madness. But remember, your frappuccino, gourmet dark chocolate bar, or hot cocoa owes its life to those fearless smugglers and ritual-obsessed artists. Every bean you enjoy is a tiny echo of Ek Chua's whispered bargain, and the artistic genius that painted monkeys in togas to mock rivals. And that scandal in Palenque? It's the original cautionary tale of don't mess with public opinion when grain is at stake. Substitute grain for gas prices, and you've got a political drama that could have aired on Netflix, except with more masks and fewer commercial breaks. In Part 4, we'll journey into the nighttime world of Mayan astronomy, how they tracked stars to predict doom, built oversized observatories, and held cosmic dance-offs under meteor showers. We'll also decode the love letters carved in stelae, romantic scribbles that read, "Your dew-kissed cheek outshines the morning star," and "Let's sacrifice together, baby." Get ready for a finale that's part sci-fi, part romance, and 100% Mayan. Madness, welcome brave soul, to the final descent into Mayan madness, where stars whispered secrets, gods moonlighted as astronomers, and lovers traded tender words like, "May your maize always rise tall." If you thought human sacrifice and cacao smugglers were intense, wait until you meet the obsessive skywatchers of ancient Mesoamerica. The Maya didn't just glance at the stars, they interrogated them like overzealous customs agents. Every glimmer was a message, every eclipse a declaration, every meteor a possible layoff notice from the gods. The obsessive Mayan astronomers. At the heart of every great Maya city stood not just temples and ball courts, but observatories, round stone towers built for one purpose, staring at the heavens until the sky blinked first. The most famous was El Caracol at Chichen Itza, a squat, lumpy structure that looked like a cross between a watchtower and an ancient smoothie blender. Through carefully placed windows, astronomer priests tracked the movement of Venus, Mars, and whatever flaming ball of doom streaked overhead. Why Venus? Because the Maya believed the planet was a divine hitman. When Venus appeared as the morning star, it was considered a bad omen. Kings declared war, sacrifices tripled, and anyone who stubbed their toe blamed it on cosmic misalignment. The Maya even kept Venus tables, elaborate star charts carved into stone and bark books that made your grandma's lunar calendar look like a toddler's scribble. How to predict an eclipse with zero Wi-Fi, Forget modern telescopes and apps that tell you when to snap your Insta-worthy moon pic. Maya astronomers predicted eclipses using a system of interlocking calendars so complicated, modern scholars need both a PhD and caffeine-induced visions to decipher them. The sacred Solkin, a 260-day ritual calendar, spun alongside the Hob, a 365-day solar calendar. Together, they formed a kind of cosmic zipper, and when certain dates overlapped, bam, time for a sky blackout. Eclipses were major bad news, omens of death, royal upheaval, and corn blight. In response, entire cities would hunker down, light fires, bang pots, and chant prayers like panicked tenants trying to shoo away a cursed landlord. During these events, special priests known as sky seers would climb to the temple tops with obsidian mirrors, waiting to catch the first glimpse of the darkening sun. If the eclipse took longer than expected, somebody was getting sacrificed for poor time management. Celestial dance-offs. Think ancient astronomy was all serious faces and weather predictions? Think again. The Maya hosted nighttime festivals under meteor showers, believing the stars themselves were gods racing across the firmament. Villagers mimicked these celestial sprints in elaborate dance-offs, their bodies painted with phosphorescent dyes that glowed in the dark. The choreography included exaggerated leaps, rolls, and what can only be described as the ancient Mesoamerican version of breakdancing. Losers weren't sacrificed, for once, but had to clean up after the festival. A far worse fate when you realized it involved collecting spent torches, cleaning animal blood from stone altars, and hauling drunk elders out of cenotes, love, letters on stele. The Maya weren't all blood rituals and war declarations. They had a surprisingly poetic side, often immortalized in stele, towering stone slabs carved with glyphs and images of kings, battles, and occasionally, steamy love, confessions. One stela from Copan reads, "To the woman whose gaze shames the sun, whose laughter cools the tongue like cacao on a summer's breath, I offer my maize and my soul." Another, from the lesser-known site of Yaxchilan, boasts, "I will fight Xibalba for you, leap between worlds, and build you a house of jade and serpent feathers." Basically, ancient pickup lines you could still deploy in the right niche history convention. The myth of the Star Woman. Maya legend spoke of a celestial goddess known as Ix Star Woman, who ruled the night skies. She was said to weave the Milky Way from strands of silver hair, placing the planets like pearls along her braid. Star Woman fell in love with a mortal warrior who tried to climb the heavens using a vine ladder. As punishment for defying cosmic protocol, the gods cut his ladder and he fell into Xibalba. But every year, during the Perseid meteor shower, his soul tried to climb again, the sparks of his struggle streaking across the sky. Villagers told this tale to children to explain shooting stars, and also as a cautionary metaphor for dating above your pay grade. The cosmic divorce. Remember that love triangle from earlier? Turns out it didn't end with a neat celestial custody agreement. Centuries later, the sun god Kinich Ahau filed for a cosmic divorce from Ixchel, accusing her of excessive lunar moodiness and interference with scheduled solar eclipses. The divorce proceedings played out through planetary misalignments and unprecedented droughts. At one point, Venus was reportedly bribed by Ixchel to delay its rise, while the Mars took Kinich Ahau's side by setting unusually early, much to the annoyance of both astronomers and corn farmers. A particularly garish fresco in Calakmul depicts this cosmic courtroom drama. Kinich seated on a throne of sunbeams, Ixchel wielding a crescent blade, and a lineup of minor deities weeping into their cocoa cups. Astronomical petty revenge. When gods got petty, mortals suffered. One story tells of when Chaac, still bitter about losing his cosmic custody battle, created an artificial drought by stealing clouds and hiding them behind the Pleiades. For 18 months, rivers shrank, wells dried up, and temples cracked under the heat. The solution? A midnight negotiation led by a shaman armed with a jaguar skull and a bag of hallucinogenic mushrooms. After a particularly spirited trade session involving 23 quetzal feathers and 2 liters of chili spiced cacao, Chaac released a single storm cloud. It rained for 6 minutes. The Maya called it a significant improvement, the last prophecy. The Maya believed in cycles, that every great age ended with a cosmic catastrophe followed by rebirth. The infamous 2012 Mayan apocalypse date? A misread prophecy about the end of the 13th Baktun, a 394-year cycle. While modern doom mongers expected fireballs and plagues, the Maya would have seen it as a prime opportunity to host a festival, build a new ball court, and maybe sacrifice an intern or two. Ancient scribes predicted the sky would turn blood red, the maize god would vanish for a week, and Xibalba's gates would creak open. Of course, none of this happened in 2012, likely because the gods had grown bored of humanity and were binge-watching celestial Netflix. Scholars debate whether this was a case of misinterpretation or divine apathy. The star map that shouldn't exist. In 1987, archaeologists unearthed a star map in a cave near Uxmal, featuring constellations unknown to the ancient world. Dubbed the Map of the Dead Sky, it depicted star clusters resembling modern-day Andromeda and Orion. The glyph captions were cryptic: the teeth of night, the road of burning bones, and the mouth of the third earth. Some researchers claim it's a record of a long-lost comet strike. Others suspect it's a forgery by rogue 8th century astronomers, seeking to invent horror stories for kicks. Either way, it's a cosmic mystery, and proof the Maya made even stargazing into a blood-curdling experience. The forgotten goddess of insomnia, rounding out the pantheon, is Xibalba, a goddess of restless nights and bad omens. She was blamed for the tossing and turning of kings, the cries of newborns at midnight, and the unnerving rustle of leaves in windless air. Her symbol was a twisted rope and a pair of bloodshot eyes. Sleep-deprived scribes blamed her for typos and stele inscriptions, while warriors blamed her for botched night raids. Villagers made tiny amulets of black jade to ward off her influence. Ironically, these charms caused their own trouble. Their rattling reportedly attracted jaguars. And so, dear mortals, we conclude this descent into Mayan cosmic chaos. A world where gods cheated at astronomy, smugglers disguised themselves as rodents, and death was but a wardrobe change away. The Maya mastered time, space, and tragedy with more flair and dark humor than most civilizations dared. So next time you glance up at the night sky, remember, you're staring into the same celestial drama that made an ancient king sob into his cacao. The universe hasn't changed. We've just upgraded our torches to LED. Thanks for coming along for this wild ride. Drop a comment with your favorite ridiculous god, or the ancient curse you'd least like to trigger. And until our next journey, may your nights be jaguar-free, your cacao unpoisoned, and your eclipses punctual. Imagine stumbling into a mist-shrouded forest, where antlered silhouettes loom between ancient oaks. A blood-red moon rises over stone circles older than your grandpa's grandpa, and the wind whispers, "Your soul looks delicious tonight." Welcome to Celtic mythology, where gods throw faster temper tantrums than toddlers. Sacrifice isn't just for dinner, and even the trees might plot against you. Before we plunge into this wild otherworld, brace yourself. You're about to meet deities who invent storms for fun, wage cosmic turf wars, and expect you to carve your own offering into a standing stone. So grab a torch if you survive the journey, and let's wander together into the absurd, brutal, and darkly hilarious world of Celtic gods. First, the Dagda, the good god who eats like a hobbit. Meet the Dagda, the good god, Celtic pantheon's lovable ogre dad, a giant with a prodigious appetite, magical harp, and a club that can both kill and resurrect. Picture a rotund chieftain in chainmail stained with stew, sipping mead from a cauldron always refilled by an endless engine of divine sloppy chef magic. Personality and powers. The Dagda manages life, death, fertility, and weather. Basically, he's overbooked. His harp plays melodies that control the seasons, and his cauldron feeds an army without ever running dry. Terrific perks, unless you're his neighbor and he decides your crops could spice up the stew. Cosmic family, man. He's married to Boann, garnering the River Boyne's name, and endlessly flirts with goddesses, causing enough divine drama to fill a dozen sagas. He once seduced Boann by conjuring a year-blurring fog so that time sped past, concealing their tryst. In early Irish, "it wasn't me" excuse gone mythic. Survival. Tip: if invited to his banquet, don't mention diets. The man might politely ask if you'd like a second ox. Or 5. Refusal risks offending a deity who can resurrect your ancestors, literally, just to prove a point. Dusra, the Morrigan, war's horror queen and apocalyptic diva. Next up, the Morrigan, phantom queen of war, fate, and crows. Think Goddess of Doom, with a resume in battlefield sabotage and shapeshifting. 3 faces of terror. Sometimes she appears as a raven, other times as a mud-splattered hag, occasionally as a breathtaking beauty who lures kings into traps. Her shapeshifting is less about fun and more about, I'll ruin your life from every angle. Battlefield guitar. Hero, legend says she appears before a great battle, croaking terrible omens. Warriors who glimpse her find their courage drained faster than their shield holes fill with arrows. Royal breakup specialist. She famously tormented the hero god Ku Chulainn in Tain Bo Kuailnga, shapeshifting into his lover's form to distract him mid-duel. Talk about passive-aggressive divine intervention. Survival. Tip, spotted a lone raven circling overhead. Don't shrug it off as a pigeon. Hide, and maybe carry a lucky clover, if you find one while fleeing. Moondrom. Lug, the handy hunter and all-star warrior. Lug Lam Fada, long arm, the ultimate multitasker, god of arts, crafts, war, and the sun. Basically the Celtic Renaissance man, minus the rough collar. Child prodigy, born fully grown and armed with every skill known to mortals and immortals. We're talking champion archer, bard, smith, judge, king, like an overachieving startup founder with a spear. Spear of ass kicking. His lethal spear, slaughterer of spears, could never miss, yet had to be borrowed from the sea god Nethans and returned promptly, because Celtic gods respected rental agreements. Father figure, Lug spearheaded the Tuatha De Danann, people of the goddess Danu, leading them in their epic struggle to conquer Eriu, Ireland, from the Fir-Bolg and Fomorians. Ancient battles where head count trophies were literally heads. Survival. Tip, if Lug invites you to a craft fair, don't underestimate his booth. He can out-knife throw the knife throwers, out-juggle the jugglers, and still catch you dumpster diving for leftovers. Nangavde. Brigid, the overworked goddess of fire, poetry, and healing. Brigid, daughter of the Dagda and goddess of hearth, home, poetry, and smithcraft. Think Mary Poppins meets Tony Stark, if both wore wool and chanted spells. Triple aspect. Brigid's triple form embodies poetry, smithing, and healing. So she's either 3 sisters in one body or one goddess who never stops clocking in at 3 jobs. Flame bearer, keeper of the perpetual fire at Kildare, tended by virgin priestesses for centuries. Sparks frequently caused panics. One slip and an entire sacred flame might incinerate the temple mid-prayer, mending in mayhem. She could heal wounds with a single word or craft a sword so sharp it cleaved truth from lie. Peasants prized her as a patron of blacksmiths and midwives, ideal for survivors of spear wounds or childbirth. Survival. Tip, offer her milk, butter, or poetry. Failure to sow May Day. Brigid crosses outside your door might earn you blessed insomnia, or worse, impromptu poetry critiques. Eindavde, Chernunos, the forest's savage gentleman. Chernunos, lord of wild things, the antlered horned god associated with nature, wealth, and the underworld. A woodland CEO who controls beasts and riches alike. Iconic antlers, depicted seated cross-legged with stag antlers, gaunt yet dignified. Some theorize he's a metaphor for deer needlessly confused as a bucolic centaur. Guardian of wildlife, commands stags, wolves, and serpents. If you catch him stroking a serpent like a feline, you're supposed to marvel at nature's balance. Or just run because giant horns plus snake equals bad day. Underworld ties. Though associated with forests, he also links to the afterlife, possibly guiding souls through silent groves after death. Survival. Tip, when lost in the woods, prostrate yourself and whisper, I mean no harm to your mushrooms. Offer acorns if you have them. Chernunos loves free snacks. Aravde, Aran, king of Anaman, otherworld host with the most meat Aran, ruler of Anaman, the otherworld, where feasting, fair play, and occasional soul harvesting happen in equal measure. Feastmonger, his realm is a banquet hall where food never runs out, and neither do ghostly servants. Mortal heroes like Pwyll accidentally swap places with him for a year. Imagine being CEO of a ghost rave for 365 days. Hunting party. Aran hosts mythical hunts where hounds chase enchanted beasts. Losers risk being devoured, or worse, invited back as skeletal hunting pets. Cosmic Exchange Program. In the first branch of the Mabinogi, Pwyll rules Anne Dublin in Iran's stead for a year, forging alliances and testing moral fiber. Swap governance was the Celtic answer to diplomatic immunity. Survival. Tip: if Iran offers to host you, don't ask about the guest list. Some attendees are notoriously bad conversationalists, preferring to gnaw on your essence. Yeravde. Nuada Ergetlam, the one-armed silver king. Nuada, first king of the Tuatha De Danann, lost his arm in battle and was replaced by a silver prosthetic, ancient Celtic innovation in bionics, circa 1200 BCE. Silver hand, crafted by Dian Secht, healing god, and Craden, smith. The arm was purely decorative. Nuada still couldn't swing a sword with it, but it looked impressive enough to maintain his kingship until a fully functional replacement returned. King versus laws. Losing a limb violated the druidic laws that a leader must be unblemished, so Nuada temporarily abdicated. Celtic democracy at its finest. No maimed monarch allowed. Comeback. King. After his replacement arm proved no combat help, he relinquished the prosthesis and the throne, demonstrating that sometimes plain flesh beats gleaming silver. Survival. Tip: if you lose a hand, don't expect to stay head of your household, but a shiny chrome prosthetic might earn you local legend status. Irtavde. The Tuatha De Danann, a jury of divine eccentrics, the collective pantheon, people of the goddess Danu, arrived aboard dark clouds, fought Fomorians, sea giants, and settled Ireland, founders of magic, druidry, and endless bickering, internal turf wars. They squabbled constantly, some unseated by one-armed cousins, others ousted by shape-shifting harpies. Their councils likely resembled chaotic fantasy parliaments without the order and silence rule. Divine professions. Every skill had a patron: smiths, healers, warriors, poets, kings, drunks. You name it, a Danann existed. Competition was fierce. Who could brew the meanest mead or craft the sharpest sword? Demotion to fairy. After losing to mortal Milesians, they retreated underground as the Sida, fairies, still meddling in human affairs, Celtic deities doubling as whimsical pranksters and terrifying reapers. Survival. Tip: when you hear faint music at twilight, don't investigate. You might stumble into the Sida's party where invitations are eternal, and so is the hangover. Diviadi. Rituals, sacrifices, and survival horror. If you think Greek sacrifices were grim, Celtic rituals could make a Spartan flinch. Head cult. The cults prize severed heads as magical trophies, believing they house the soul. Victorious warriors displayed skulls on pikes, ancient trophies for the macabre mantelpiece. Druidic magic. Druids performed divination by mistletoe cutting and oak bark reading. Imagine your mortgage approval hinging on a tree surgeon's poetry recital. Seasonal feasts. Samhain's bonfires roasted livestock and possibly unlucky neighbors. Beltane invoked fertility via ritual maypoles and torchlight parades, suitable for farmers desperate to dodge divine frost. Survival. Tip: carry a luck charm at Samhain, but don't ask a druid to bless it. Their rituals sometimes concluded with random animal entrail confetti. Batavde. Why Celtic gods matter today. You might scroll TikTok disdainfully, sipping your oat milk latte, but modern culture still drinks from the Celtic mythic well. Literature and fantasy, from Tolkien's elves, inspired partly by the Sida, to video games, featuring Celtic-style deities. These myths fuel countless fantasies. Festivals and folklore. Halloween's roots in Samhain and midsummer bonfires echo Beltane rituals, proof that ancient gods sneak into your costume party. Nature worship. Cernunnos' reverence for wildlife resonates in today's environmentalism, except now we wield protest signs, not ritual antlers. And that, my brave wanderer, is part 1 of Celtic Gods Explained. You've met giants, gourmands, shape-shifting warlords, and bionic kings, all vying for divine glory in a land of mist, magic, and mandatory sacrifices. In part 2, we'll traverse the underworld's echoing halls, witness the Morrigan's grandest betrayals, and decode the forbidden love affair that nearly ended the world. Plus, the 7 craziest Celtic rituals you'll wish you'd never heard of. See you there, if your ghost doesn't haunt me first. The air turned cold the moment I stepped through the low arch of that ancient portal, and the torches lining the obsidian walls sputtered as if afraid to burn. Stone corridors twisted deeper than any mortal map could chart, each archway marked by the carved face of a long-dead druid whose eyes seemed to follow every step. Shadows pooled in corners, and I half expected skeletal hands to reach out and drag me into the flickering gloom. This was Aenoguen, the Celtic otherworld, promised to be a realm of endless feasting and ghostly revels, but it felt more like a funeral feast for the living. No guide met me at the threshold. Instead, a pair of hounds with eyes like polished jet pads quietly along, their hot breath misting in the chill. Their collars jingled with tiny bells made from human bone. I tried to summon courage, recalling tales of Puel's year-long guest stay. Ruled well, earned Aran's respect, returned home richer in wisdom. Still, I tucked my cloak tighter and followed the hounds into a vast hall where every surface gleamed silver. Walls, tables, even the floors looked polished by centuries of ghostly foot traffic. Music drifted in from unseen minstrels. Haunting melodies played on harps of moonlight and pipes of wind. Banquet tables groaned beneath steaming platters, a wild boar dripping honey, loaves of bread baked from golden wheat, goblets overflowing with wine that shimmered like blood. The hounds padded forwards and licked at stray crumbs, but no living creature, no mortal or divine sat at those tables. It was a feast for ghosts, bread that vanished the moment you bit it, wine that turned to smoke in your throat. Hunger gnawed at me even as dread told me to turn back. A voice like distant thunder rumbled from the far end of the hall. "Welcome, wanderer." Aran himself emerged, tall, pale as moonlight, eyes reflecting every candle flame. He wore a cloak of raven feathers that seemed alive, rustling as though greeted by an unseen breeze. "You wish to see the heart of Anamun," he said, voice polite but edged with something hungry. "Eat, drink, and warm yourself. Tonight we dine together." He motioned to a seat carved from yew wood and bone. I sat, hands trembling. Aran raised his goblet, to new friendships and old debts. I raised mine too quickly, spilling wine that hissed as it hit the silver table. When I looked up, Aran's polite smile had vanished. His eyes gleamed with something fierce. "Be careful what you offer, mortal," he said, and the hounds growled. I swallowed, heart pounding. Something in me whispered that every crumb, every drop was a currency in this realm, and I had no idea what my debt might cost. Once I managed to swallow hot wine that left my throat blistered. Aran leaned forward. "You have heard of the Morrigan's betrayals?" he asked. I nodded, voice lost. He continued, "She who walks as crow, hag, and maiden has touched every great heart in Ireland with blood and woe. Yet her greatest treachery lies not on battlefields, but in love." His eyes bored into mine. "Listen well. Long ago, before a Cuchulain's spears drank first blood, the Morrigan sought to bind herself to him in spirit, to claim his power as her own. She appeared as a radiant woman at a crossroads, cloak white as milk, hair spun from star threads. Cuchulain, ever the boastful warrior, declared her the finest prize he'd ever seek. They lay together under an oak tree whose roots drank of the river Boyne. But the Morrigan rose at dawn as crow, talons slick with mud, and pecked his throat until he lay gasping. Only when she saw his life bleeding into the roots did she change back to woman, eyes bright with triumph. "I loved you," she croaked, "yet love is but a weapon." He survived, but the wound scarred his soul. Mortals whispered that every warrior's vow to her was half tainted from the start. I shivered, the candles flickered as though they sensed my horror. Aran's expression softened, or so I thought, before hardening like steel. The Morrigan's heart is never fixed. She trades devotion like cattle, only to devour it later. Beware her kiss, for it tastes of ash and regret. He stood then, cloak swirling. "Come," he beckoned, and we descended a spiral staircase sheathed in roots and mist. The walls glistened wet like the inside of a living thing. At the bottom lay a vaulted chamber lit by pale phosphorescence. In the center, a pool of black water so still it swallowed every reflection. "This is the mirror of Lu," Aran said. "Druids scry here to glimpse true fate." He knelt and traced a finger on the surface. The water rippled, revealing visions of lovers torn apart by oath and blade, kings undone by secret passions, and mortals who bartered their souls for a fleeting embrace. When I peered in, I saw my own face, pale, gaunt, eyes lost in endless corridors. I recoiled. A Ron gestured, and two figures emerged from the shadows. A man crowned with briar, his body draped in moss, and a woman of moonlight and tears. They circled each other warily, voices low as if fearful of waking the silence. "This is the forbidden affair," Aran whispered, "the goddess of dawn whose name I dare not speak, and the exiled king of winter." I strained to hear, but their words were lost beneath the drip of water and the hushed clamor of distant spirits. Suddenly, the man lunged, pressing his face to the woman's. His breath smelled of frost and longing. She fled like smoke, but he pursued, weaving through pillars of bone until she stumbled at the edge of some unseen precipice. He reached for her, hands trembling, and she turned, eyes soft with sorrow. Their voices entwined at last, humming an ancient lament too beautiful to bear. Then she kissed him, and the world shuddered. Stone cracked, the pool boiled. I fled upward, footsteps echoing as the chamber collapsed behind me. Bursting back into the banquet hall, I found Aran alone, goblet raised. "You have seen more than you must," he said softly. "Return now to your world, mortal, and guard your heart." He inclined his head, and the hall erupted in silence. Stumbling through the torchlit corridors, the hounds at my heels, I reached the archway that shimmered with morning light. Turning once, I saw Aran's figure framed in darkness, his raven cloak spread like wings. Then he vanished. I crossed the threshold into dawn, leaving behind a debt I could not name. Now I carry two warnings: never dine in Anwin, and never trust love that wears three faces. Above all, remember these 7 rituals of survival in Celtic myth. Carve your own protective symbols into standing stones. Never refuse hospitality lest you bind yourself to endless repayments. Hide your true name from spirits hungry for identity. Carry mistletoe blessed by living hands. Dance with eyes closed under Samhain moon to confuse shapeshifters. Leave gifts of milk and butter for roadside fairy folk. And always keep a silver blade at your side to cut ties with treacherous uts, divinities. For in Ireland's mists, the line between feast and funeral, loyalty and betrayal, is as thin as a crow's beak, and as sharp. Imagine waking up in a mist-soaked bog with no pants, a deer skull tied to your belt, and a note reading, "Ode to the Morrigan one soul. Redeem before Samhain." Welcome back to the baffling world of Celtic mythology, where the gods aren't distant sky beings, but petty, feral, slightly unhinged neighbors who won't stop hexing your cow. If you thought the Greeks were messy, the Celts will make you nostalgic for polite pantheons. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. 1. The Fomorians, the Celtic nightmare cousins. Let's begin this chapter of mythological horror with the Fomorians. Now, if you picture the Tuatha De Danann as the A-listers of ancient Ireland, the Fomorians were their swamp-dwelling, cursed cousins from a Tim Burton fever dream. Who were they? Half giant, half sea demon, occasionally sporting goat legs, fish faces, or dozens of eyes. Celtic myth never could decide. One saga describes them as hideous, one-eyed, one-armed monstrosities who lived under the sea or in fog-shrouded isles. Essentially, if Lovecraft and Shrek had a design baby. What did they want? Absolute control over Ireland, endless tribute in livestock, crops, and unlucky peasants. They ruled by terror before the Tuatha arrived, and naturally the two clashed in a cosmic turf war. Balor of the Evil Eye, their crown jewel of terror. Balor had a single poisonous eye so foul it killed armies when opened. It was so toxic that it took 4 men to lift his eyelid with hooks during battle. Think Cyclops meets Death Star. Survival. Tip: if you hear drums in the fog, don't investigate. That's Fomorian happy hour, and you are the appetizer. The Second Battle of Mag Tuired. Blood, magic, and petty grudges. Forget Troy. The Second Battle of Mag Tuired makes any ancient skirmish look like a gentle pillow fight. It was the epic smackdown where the Tuatha De Danann finally faced the Fomorians to decide who'd rule Ireland's misty hills and sacred pubs. Pre-battle drama. The Dagda had to visit a Fomorian goddess named Indech's daughter to stall the enemy. In classic Celtic myth fashion, this involved eating a literal cauldron of porridge mixed with blood, entrails, and the occasional shoe. Culinary diplomacy at its finest. The clash. Warriors fought with enchanted swords, singing spears and darts of light. Druids hurled curses that turned trees against their masters. At one point, the river itself rose up and drowned half an army out of sheer boredom. Balor versus Lug, the highlight reel. Lug, golden boy of the Tuatha, faced Balor. Before Balor could nuke him with his death eye, Lug slung a slingstone through it, blasting it out the back of his skull and into the Fomorian ranks. Instant morale collapse. Aftermath. The Fomorians fled, the Tuatha claimed Ireland, and somewhere in the hills, Bridget probably lit a celebratory bonfire with the corpses of everyone who annoyed her. Moondrum. Celtic godly romance, the messiest Tinder you'll ever see. You thought Zeus was a creeper? The Celts turned divine matchmaking into a blood sport. Love was transactional, incestuous, frequently fatal, and somehow still romantic by medieval standards. Angus Og, the player of the Otherworld, god of youth, love, and slightly illegal romantic escapades. Angus tricked his own father, the Dagda, out of his estate by asking to borrow it for a day and a night, which in Celtic legalese meant forever. Then he spent eternity seducing ethereal maidens who turned into swans at dawn. Grain and Diarmuid, the Celtic myth equivalent of Romeo and Juliet, if Juliet cursed your entire kingdom. Grain, betrothed to ancient hero Fionn mac Cumhaill, eloped with the much younger Diarmuid. They fled through forests and caves, dodging Fionn's assassins. Fun fact, Fionn had a magic bag of salmon that predicted where they'd sleep next. The Morrigan's affairs. Morrigan once seduced a hero mid-battle by transforming into a gleaming young woman and offering favors in exchange for victory. When he refused, she cursed him so thoroughly his own horses turned against him. Nangavda. Celtic ritual magic, druidic shenanigans and corpse fetish. Ah yes, the druids, those wisdom-soaked, robe-clad philosophers we picture under oaks. Spoiler, they were far weirder than popular culture lets on. Weather control. Druids could summon fog, storms, and blight with incantations made of dog bark and salt-poured ale. Some battles were won because a druid sent a thick fog over the enemy and made their horses run off a cliff. Human sacrifice. Popular rumors claim they stuffed prisoners into wicker men and set them ablaze, which, while gruesome, was arguably more humane than leaving them at the Morrigan's mercy. Actual evidence suggests throat-slitting near sacred springs was a favorite pastime. Talking heads. The Celts were obsessed with severed heads. Warriors would collect their victims' heads, mount them on walls, or carry them around. Druids believed a severed head could still issue prophecies. Picture being lectured by a decomposing head mounted on a stick. Medieval Ireland's version of Twitter. Eindavde. The gods' favorite games. Hurling, boasting, and casual war. The Celts invented hurling, a violent proto-hockey where grown men bludgeoned each other with wooden sticks to fling a ball between standing stones. It wasn't a sport so much as a socially acceptable bloodletting. Heroic boasting, pre-battle speeches were an art form. Warriors would announce their family tree, boast of killing giants, and claim to have single-handedly invented fire. Liars were heckled, sometimes stabbed. Mock battles. Before actual wars, druids often staged mock battles, friendly massacres with blunted weapons to settle disputes. Of course, people still died, and grievances carried over anyway. Áraude, otherworldly raves and portal mishaps. In Celtic myth, the veil between worlds was gossamer thin, especially during Samhain. The otherworld wasn't some distant heaven or hell. It was right beneath your village, waiting for you to trip into it. Accidental crossovers. Many a shepherd followed a lost cow into a fairy mound and returned a century later, aged not a day but missing several teeth and half his memories. Otherworld feasts. The food looked divine, but one bite could trap you there forever. Heroes learned to keep their lips sealed even when surrounded by dancing fae offering mead. Time dilation? Days spent in the otherworld equaled centuries outside. You could return to find your house a ruin, your wife remarried, and your prize pig now folklore. 7. The Síde, Ireland's most passive-aggressive neighbors. After losing Ireland to mortals, the Tuatha De Danann didn't retire gracefully. They moved underground, becoming the Síde, fairies. Far from cute, these were powerful, vengeful gods moonlighting as trickster spirits. Stealing babies, they'd swap mortal infants with changelings for fun. Newborn acting strange? Might be a fairy who's plotting your demise. Night rides. The Síde held nighttime processions. Seeing them meant bad luck, and joining them meant becoming an eternal party guest you could never leave. Curses for days. Offend the Síde by cutting a sacred thorn bush or blocking a fairy path, and you might find your cows milked dry by invisible hands for the next 7 generations. Irtavde, the great cosmic petty war. Even after death, the gods didn't let things go. Their grudges lasted centuries. Morrigan's rage toward the Fomorians was matched only by Lu's vendetta against treacherous human kings. Dead gods appeared as crows, mist, or disembodied voices, offering unsolicited advice or cursing entire bloodlines. The Morrigan's death oath. Legend claims she once cursed a mortal king to die by the blood of his own people's cattle, a fate so specific it required the entire kingdom to stay off beef for a year to dodge it. That wraps up part 3 of our epic dive into Celtic mythology's wildest horrors, loves, and cosmic beefs. In part 4, we'll unravel the final absurdities, ancient Celtic creation myths, the fate of the gods after Christianity's rise, and the still whispered curses haunting Irish hillsides. Prepare for holy relic thefts, talking trees, and gods who refuse to be cancelled by history. Want it? I'll write it. Say the word. A network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Повторить. Четвертую часть. Hey guys, as our final lantern flickers through the mists of Celtic lore, prepare to glimpse origins older than your smartphone's battery drain. Witness God's bow before rising faiths, and discover the lingering curses that crawl through Kerry's heaths at midnight. If you thought heart-stealing hags and antlered hermits were wild, buckle up. Creation, collapse, and centuries of whispered shadows await. First, the birth of all things, Eriu, Banba, and Fodla. Long before the Tuatha De Danann arrived on those storm-racked shores, 3 divine sisters, Eriu, Banba, and Fodla, wandered the Emerald Isle. Each asked that their name graced the land, and so Ireland remained known by all 3. Banba, and Fodla. Imagine a country with 3 official names, none of which fit on a postage stamp. Eriu, the foremost, personified sovereignty and harvest. Her voice was the first dawn breeze rustling barley fields. Her tears became dew. Banba, war-torn and proud, carried a spear embossed with frost, reminding mortals that peace was never guaranteed. Fodla, gentlest of the trio, whispered to rivers and stones, binding magic into every pebble. Survival tip: if a druid offers you land in Eriu, double-check whether it's cursed by Banba or soaked in Fodla's enchanted waters. Blood sacrifice is optional, but soil compatibility is not. Dusra, the cosmic forge, Dian Sesh, and the healing arts. When battle shattered bodies faster than breweries churn mead, the Celts turned to Dian Sesh, god of healing. His workshop smelled of willow bark and iron, his tools rattled with divine urgency. Miraculous restorations. He stitched flesh with golden needles, brewed potions that staunched any wound, and once even fashioned a silver arm for Nuada. Botanical experiments, roots, bark, and honey combined into salves that could mend broken bones or spark prophetic visions. Some scribes whisper that the druid's sleep draught originated here, a sleeping potion so potent it sparked accidental time travel. See Shepherd in Otherworld. Survival tip: always carry a leaf from Dian Seich's sacred ash grove. If wounded, chew it and swear 3 oaths to the well-being of Irish cattle. Moondram, the decline of the old gods, Christian dawn and druidic dusk. By the dawn of the 5th century CE, a new faith swept westward, Christianity. Unlike earlier gods who demanded rivers of blood, This religion promised eternal beer, but only if you accepted a resurrected carpenter as your savior. Conversions and conflicts. Monasteries rose from druids' groves, bells tolling where oaks once whispered. Some druids embraced the cross, others retreated beneath hillocks, muttering spells that mingled with Latin chants. Syncretic survival. Many Celtic rituals survived under holy guises. May Day became Beltane sprouting crosses of flowers. Samhain became All Hallows' Eve, still a night when the veil thinned. In parts of Donegal, villagers lit Saint John's fires that were nothing more than pagan bonfires in clergy-approved orange. Survival tip: baptize offerings in holy water to appease both saint and sprite. Never disrespect a chapel-feasting fairy hosting inside. Nangavda, the last whisperers, curses and blessings of the Sida. Though drained of power by chapel walls, the Sida refused to vanish. They lurked in lofts, sidled alongside pilgrim paths, and embroidered their influence into the very soil. Widow's bane, curse. Legend tells of a farmer in Kildare who cut a fairy thorn to repair his fence. That night, his wife vanished into mist, replaced by a sorrowful widow whose eyes shone with fairy fire. He lived the rest of his life half bereft, haunted by distant harp music. Blessed wells. Some holy wells bear dual significance. Pilgrims left pennies for St. Bridget. Druids left candles for the old goddess. Water stirred by both faiths would heal boils in men broken hearts. Survival tip: drop a coin marked with your own name into a holy well, then steal away. If your coin still sits tomorrow, neither god nor fairy has claimed you. Eindavde, the forgotten texts. Bardic poetry as Last Testament ruined abbeys conceal manuscripts of Druidic lore merged with Christian psalms. Bardic poets scandalize bishops by embedding triple-verse enchantments among hymns. The Book of Taliesin, attributed to a shape-shifting druid bard. Its verses curse those who mock rhyme. Read it aloud under a full moon and risk rhyming nightmares. The metrical Dinshenchas, lore geography mixing local myths with stone origins. One stanza proclaims that knocking on a particular standing stone at dusk invites the deep ones of Andubian. Don't test it if you value your ribs. Survival tip: learn 2 stanzas of Dinshenchas by heart, worthy to ward off a minor fairy intrusion or at least confuse them into polite silence. Aravde, modern echoes, folklore and sport and song. Today's hurlers still honor Luch when they haul slyatars across fields. GAA clubs adopt crests featuring hounds, crows, or branches of oak. Folk musicians sprinkle tapestries of ancient names into rising melodies. The wolf tones. Irish ballads often open with lines like By Tara's hills and Boyne's old stream, evoking Banbas and Ariu spirits. Tourist traps and truths. Commercial fairy tours lead busloads around Killarney, pointing out fairy forts, spoil heaps of ancient homes. Crowds toss coins and giggle. Some locals swear that coins vanish overnight, moved by curious Sida fingers. Survival tip: if you join a fairy tour, carry a pebble from home to swap for a coin. Leave the true coin undisturbed, then go pray by a church porch for supernatural toleration. Rediscovered rituals. Neo-pagan revivals and their pitfalls. Modern druids and Celtic reconstructionists resurrect old rites, blessing new cars at Imbolc, gathering mistletoe at the solstice, or staging Celtic Samhain festivities with jack-o'-lanterns and plastic cauldrons. Well-intentioned errors. Some revivals mistakenly use medieval Gaelic instead of reconstructed Proto-Celtic incantations, resulting in accidental comedic curses. May your neighbor's sheep all speak in tongues. Crossover curses. A 21st century neo-pagan circle in Galway attempted a blood covenant by pricking thumbs and exchanging drops. Unbeknownst to them, they invoked an ancient bargain that attracted a malevolent Sida lord. The ritual had to be undone at dawn with a cross-faith liturgy. Survival tip: when experimenting with old rites, always include a modern disclaimer. No actual spirits were harmed in this ritual. Itavada, the last curse, echoes in the land. Even today, travelers whisper of cursed crossroads, phantom lights over bogs, and the deafening silence on certain summer nights near Lough Neagh, as though the world holds its breath. The Banshee's Veil. In counties Clare and Cork, a grey-shrouded figure appears before a household tragedy. Some claim she's a lost druid's soul, Others say she's the Morrigan scouting fresh victims. The changelings cry. Parents in Munster still hang iron horseshoes above cradles to ward off fairy swabs. They swore the trick kept their infants human, but regrets endured when first cries sounded hollow and echoing. And so ends our tangled pilgrimage through Celtic myth's final corridors, from primordial sisters to healing gods, through the twilight of druidic power, into modern echoes and resurgent rites. These tales remind us that every blade of grass might conceal a whispered grudge, and every standing stone could hold a captive poem or curse. If you survive this journey, congrats. You're now a self-appointed guardian against horned deities and spectral bargains. Drop a comment with the ritual you'd least like to fall for, or the deity you'd duel in sarcastic banter. And remember, when the wind moans through the oaks tonight, it might be Eru, Banba, and Fodla laughing at your impunity. Until next time, may your hearth fires burn bright, your mead cup never empty, and your soul never drift too close to the sea to Slan agus beannacht. Picture this. You're tied to an oar in a longship braving North Sea rollers, soaked in freezing spray, while your new owner lounges in furs and yells, "Row faster or I'll trade you for a goat." Welcome to life as a Viking thrall, where freedom is a rumor, dinner's whatever your master tosses you, and weekend is just another day of hauling peat. Being a Viking thrall was the ultimate survival nightmare. Forget rustic cabins and heroic sagas. You lived in a world of forced labor, constant fear, and zero personal agency. Let's dive into the dank history of servitude among the Norse, where your name didn't matter. Your pain was part of the profit, and your only hope was scraping by until someone decided you'd make a better shield maker than a crofter. First, how you became a thrall. Most thralls ended up in chains by one of three delightful methods: captured in raids, Viking longships snuck into villages at dawn, doors splintered, screaming families scattered, and warriors seized anyone not swift enough to dodge an axe. You woke up in the hold with broken ribs and the pungent smell of salted fish. Debt, bondage. Poor Icelandic farmers sometimes sold themselves or family members into slavery to pay off debts after a bad harvest. Imagine signing a contract that said, "I owe you this cow, so here's my daughter for 10 years. Charming. Inheritance. If your ancestors lost a war, you were born property. No paperwork needed, just a hereditary brand stamped on your wrist and a lifelong sentence. Dusra. Your daily grind life as a thrall meant sunrise to sunset labor with no overtime pay, and gods forbid you hoped for a break. Typical chores included farming. You tilled rocky soil, planted barley with hands numb from frost, and harvested under the midnight sun. If the yield sucked, you still paid rent, usually in the form of more barley, which you painfully raised. Household tasks: fetching water from icy streams, chopping wood until your axe hand bled, and sweeping the longhouse floor of sheep droppings before the master's feast. If you slipped and broke a plate, expect a thrashing worthy of a berserker's rage. Smithing and crafting. Strong thralls became metalworkers, forging knives and spearheads. You handled red-hot iron with no gloves, knowing a single misstep would cost you a hand. Literally, rowing and fishing. On expeditions, you were the engine. Bent double at your oar, you battled seasickness, flying drakkar spray, and the master's whip if the ship stalled. Moondram, living conditions. The Longhouse Dungeon. Your so-called shelter was a dim, smoke-choked hall, shared with livestock and rotting hay. Details include bunks of bone-chilling thatch, thin straw piled on wooden planks, perfect for breeding lice and nightmares. Communal heat. A central hearth provided minimal warmth. You huddled near embers, waiting for the master's guard dog to vacate the coziest spot. Rations of regret. Your daily meal was a watery porridge of barley husks, punctuated by scrawny bits of salted fish if you were lucky. Fancy lamb stew, only for the hall's honored guests. Sanitation. Shmen City, no privy. You squatted behind the barn, praying you didn't step in last night's offerings to the earth god. Fourth discipline. The iron fist of lord-in-law rebellion was non-existent. Punishments ranged from flogging. A birch rod could crack ribs faster than a raiding party split a skull. Branding. Masters marked runaway thralls with hot irons, often on the neck, so every glance in the mirror reminded you of your fate. Execution. as entertainment. If you crossed the line, you might be hanged or thrown to wolves, cheered on by drunken warriors after a successful raid. 5. No rights, no recourse. Unlike free farmers, thralls had zero legal standing. If your master sold you, you vanished from your family's memories. Appeals to local assemblies were futile. Without status or oaths, you were an invisible cog in the Viking war machine. Aravde, the psychological torment beyond physical agony. Being a thrall meant constant mental anguish, identity erasure. You lost your name. To your captors, you were the number 5 of House Haraldsson. Isolation. Masters often forbade communication among thralls to break solidarity. You ate alone, toiled alone, dreamed alone. Hopelessness. Every sunrise reminded you that yesterday's labor changed nothing. Escape routes were drowned by fjords or patrolled by dogs. Yeram. Occasional glimmers of hope. In rare cases, a thrall might buy freedom or earn it through exceptional service, like saving a child or deciphering runes for the master. Even then, freedom often meant a meager plot of land in the farthest valley, worthless rock, miles from any trading route. 8. Myth versus reality. The saga's sweetener. Norse sagas occasionally name-check thralls as cunning or heroic sidekicks, but real thralls were far more oppressed than fictional favorites like Kari or Grima. These epic tales gloss over frostbitten toes and face-split tedium, preferring dramatic escapes over the daily grind of servitude. Divyadi. The thrall's afterlife. Some believed that dying in service could earn you a place in Hell's half-house, a dreary realm where endless drudgery awaited. Others whispered that faithful thralls might join their master in Valhalla, but only to serve mead to the Einherjar. Comforting thought. 10. Why this matters today. Understanding thralls reveals the dark underbelly of Viking glory. Those grand raids and shield walls rested on the bone-breaking labor of the enslaved. Next time you admire a horned helmet in a museum, remember the nameless souls who forged it with numb hands and broken spirits. That's part 1 of why it sucked to be a Viking thrall, slave. We've covered how you ended up in bondage, your brutal daily grind, and the endless cycle of punishment and despair. In part 2, we'll delve into the ebb and flow of thrall rebellions, secret alliances among the enslaved, and the moment some dared to fight back. Plus, the 7 weird ways masters tested loyalty, and the astonishing true stories of thralls who survived the impossible. See you soon, if I haven't been traded for a goat already. Now that you've survived the dawn to dusk drudgery of being a Viking thrall, welcome back to the nightmare, where some days you row until your shoulders leak blood, and other days you wonder why you didn't just drown in the fjord. In this chapter, we expose the thrall's secret rebellions, the twisted loyalties masters enforced, and the bizarre rituals used to test your worth. Because even in chains, hope and horror wage their own battles. First, whispered plots in the longhouse shadows. While you heaved peat by day, a hidden network of thralls conspired by night. In the darkness, hushed voices exchanged tales of distant lands and whispered the dangerous word, freedom. Coded knots and rune carvings thralls couldn't boldly proclaim dissent. They'd be flogged or worse. Instead, they tied special knots in rope. 1 twist meant meet at the old oak. 2 twists meant bring a weapon. 3 meant raid tonight. Some bold souls etched miniature runes onto spoon handles, messages only fellow enslaved could decipher. 2 torches equals springtide escape. Each carving risked brutal punishment, but the desperate few believed death at sea was preferable to endless bondage. Secret alliances across bonds. Not all thralls hated each other. Alliances formed among those who discovered mutual quirks. Hall servants and ship rowers would quietly swap scraps of salted fish beyond prying eyes, forging bonds stronger than iron chains. Sometimes a more skilled craft thrall secretly taught others to pick a lock or fashion crude flint blades, skills that could unshackle wrists, if only the master's dog didn't bark first. The Forbidden Feast, twice a year, at Yule and Midsummer, masters hosted lavish feasts for free folk. Thralls served mead and roast boar, their bones aching from the demands of splintered wood floors. Yet some daring souls tumbled scraps beneath floorboards, marking spots where a hidden cache of stolen cheese or bread could sustain a small uprising. Only the boldest risked retrieving it late into the night, crawling past sleeping hounds to break stale bonds of hunger. Dusra. Masters' loyalty tests. Welcome to the Thrall Hunger Games. Viking masters didn't trust their thralls. They knew desperation could kill loyalty faster than a sword, so they devised twisted tests to weed out slackers, sycophants, and potential rebels. The sacred peat run. One night, the master would order the thralls to fetch a fresh load of peat from an island 3 miles offshore, under a new moon. No guide, no lanterns, just whispered threats. Return by dawn, or we'll trade your family for 2 goats. The ice-choked sea was lethal, and only the fleetest or luckiest survived. Those who returned were paraded at sunrise, their frozen limbs whipped for insufficient haste. Others were quietly sold at the slave market, their fates God knows where. Blood, oaths, over the forge. Masters often forced thralls working the smithy to swear oaths of fealty and blood. They'd slice a finger's tip, let a drop fall into the red-hot forge, then demand the thrall grip the blade to seal the pact. If the thrall hesitated, the master deemed them traitorous and branded them on the cheek, an eternal mark that spelled pariah. Craft that sword without resentment, a miracle of self-preservation. The naming ceremony. On rare occasions, a well-disposed master held a naming ceremony, claiming generosity. I shall give you a proper Norse name to bind you more closely to my household. Thralls lined up, trembling as the master recited runics, blessings, but halfway through, the ritual turned dark. The master announced the new name would henceforth be their brand, etched on their forearms with an iron rod, a gift that forever tethered your identity to your oppressor's whims. Moondrum, the great Thrall uprisings and why they failed. History, whispers of audacious Thrall rebellions, bold attempts to seize swords, overrun longhouses, and taste freedom. Yet they almost always ended in rivers of blood. The 845 AD Have North Rebellion. In that brutal winter, a gang of 70 thralls on a Jutland estate decided to revolt. They struck at midnight, storming the longhouse with sharpened spits and stolen trenching shovels. They bound the master's family and prepared to burn the grain stores. But their plans unraveled when one thrall, Vorik the Silent, froze at the sight of the master's toddler. A neighbor heard the child's cries, alerted the guard, and within minutes longbows were drawn. 70 thralls felled before they could learn how to reload. Vorik was impaled and the rest sold to distant markets as a cautionary masterpiece. The Siege of Skipavik, 997 AD. On a remote Icelandic fjord, over 100 thralls rallied, coordinated by a cunning former bondservant who'd once sailed for the dubious pleasure of rowing in a dragon-prowed warship. They overran the settlement while the men were at sea, but lacked siege weapons. The masters barricaded behind thick turf walls, hurling boiling oil and rotten fish at the would-be liberators. Starved and stinking, the thralls eventually surrendered, and the survivors were broken on the wheel before being sold to Irish kings. Lessons in failure. Each uprising failed for the same reason. Without weapons, alliances, or the element of surprise sustained, thralls were mowed down by archers, hounded by dogs, or crushed under armored berserkers. Their own fears fractured unity. Would you risk your family's safety if defeat meant trading them for a pig? 4. Unlikely. Bonds. Thrall and free folk. Amid brutal oppression, moments of unexpected compassion flickered, though rarely enough to matter. The widow's promise. A widow named Helga owned one thrall, Steen, who had saved her son from drowning. Though bitter about his status, she quietly taught him to read runes and allowed him to sleep indoors during storms, privileges unheard of. When Steen fell ill, Helga nursed him with herbal poultices, whispering that if he survived, she'd grant him half of her meager farm. He did, and though Helga never fulfilled her promise, claiming it was just a story, Steen gained enough favor to barter for freedom by forging the master's prized arm ring and trading it at market. Father and daughter. Sometimes thralls formed familial ties with their captors. On one Orkney farm, a thrall named Brynny fought alongside her daughter, born after Brynny's abduction, to protect the master's barn from raiders. Impressed, the master granted Brynny her daughter's freedom, hoping she'd raise the child's loyalty. It backfired. Mother and daughter fled to mainland Scotland, living as free peasants, bearing 3 more children under assumed names. The secret marriage. In rare cases, thralls married within the household. A young thrall, Eric, wed his master's cook in a clandestine midnight ceremony. Word leaked when the cook became pregnant. Furious, the master intended to execute Eric, but instead sold him to a far-off lord for a hefty price, where Eric served faithfully, gained freedom, and eventually returned to claim his wife, and seized the original master's prize stallion as revenge. 5. A thrall's worst ordeals, extreme rituals and public spectacles. Even beyond daily toil and rebellious flops, some thralls endured cruel public spectacles meant to entertain free folk. The mock battle execution enemies of the household, often thralls accused of peddling secrets to rival clans, were forced to fight a mock battle. Clad in mismatched armor, they were pitted against dogs, dwarves trained in wrestling, and occasionally berserker volunteers. Victors earned a measure of respect. Losers were executed on the spot, their deaths celebrated with ale and a new ballad. Ritual, torment at the blot. During the sacrificial festival known as blot, masters sometimes offered thralls to the gods, not by the conventional knife to the throat. Instead, the thrall was bound to a wheel, spiked with oak and hemlock. As the sun set, they were paraded before the gathering, enduring hours of spinning pain before being left at the crossroad at dawn, often dead, sometimes alive, but forever changed. The God's Mirror test, a particularly sadistic loyalty test, involved a polished shield called God's Mirror. Thralls were ordered to stare into their reflections under torchlight, recite oaths of fealty, and then reveal their deepest fear. Refusal meant the shield shattered at their face. Survival meant their terror was noted for future torment. Whispers in the night, mockery from drunk free folk, or beatings mimicking their own phobias. Aravda, escape, exile, and reinvention. Despite overwhelming odds, a handful of thralls slipped free and built new lives in lands that knew little of Norse cruelty. The deserted island. In 1023 AD, a lone thrall named Asta fled a Shetland longhouse by stowing away in a hidden bilge compartment. When the ship rested in an uncharted isle, she slipped overboard, dragging a small bundle of stolen oats. She survived weeks foraging berries and birds' eggs until a Scottish herring boat found her. Taken aboard as a free crew member, she married the captain and birthed children who never knew their mother's former name. Just the tale of a woman who washed ashore like a Viking myth. Under Muslim suns, some Viking traders sold thralls in the Levant. A skillful smith thrall, Hans, was shipped through Constantinople and ended up in Cordoba, where he taught local artisans northern techniques. Recognized for his craft, he was freed by grateful patrons, marrying a Moorish woman and raising sons who became celebrated metalworkers. His descendants still recall the northern accent as exotic heritage. The monastic redemption Christianity offered a legal loophole. Any thrall baptized and welcomed into a monastery gained sanctuary. A thrall named Ingvar sought refuge at Lindisfarne, adopting the name Brother Ivar. Though he remained in servile labor, he toiled in scriptoria copying manuscripts, eventually earning enough esteem to be declared a free man upon taking monastic vows, a rare spiritual ticket out of bondage. Yeram, the thrall's legacy, echoes in modern imagination. Though Viking sagas glorify the raiders, the thrall's plight resonates in today's media. Historical dramas, films like Outlander and TV shows like Vikings briefly glimpse thrall life, but often as one-dimensional backdrops. Real thralls fought tooth and nail for scraps of dignity. Archaeological finds, excavations of longhouses reveal hearths with worn boots, makeshift bedding, and sharpened flint tools. Evidence thralls crafted plans for freedom in secret. Literary tributes, modern authors pen novels from a thrall's perspective. Grim tales of survival that remind readers the Viking Age wasn't all raiding songs and horned helmets. That concludes part 2 of Why It Sucked to Be a Viking Thrall, Slave. We've uncovered secret rebellions, horrific loyalty tests, daring escapes, and rare glimmers of mercy. In part 3, we'll delve into the economics of thrall trade, the cultural myths that justified enslavement, and the shocking fates of those sold to distant lands. Plus, the 7 most brutal punishments that never make it into glossy history books. See you in the next saga, assuming your master hasn't traded me for a yapping hound. Imagine standing on a frozen shoreline as merchant ships unload human cargo like crates of salted fish, your future sealed with a brand and a downward nod. Now, picture that same shoreline ringing with the clink of silver coins traded for your fate. Welcome to the Viking Thrall economy, where lives changed hands faster than meat at a feast, and your worth was measured in cattle, not character. First, the economics of human cargo thralls were the Norse world's currency, and Vikings treated people like livestock at market, valuation by skill and age. Young, able-bodied men fetched the highest prices, up to 8 head of cattle or a warhorse, while children and the elderly went for a jug of mead and a few eggs. A skilled blacksmith thrall might earn triple the going rate thanks to those magical forging hands, a farmhand barely more than the price of a shield. Marketplaces and trade routes, major Viking hubs, Dublin, Birka, and Hedeby, doubled as bustling slave markets. Thralls were paraded like prize pigs, their wrists shackled, their eyes hollow. Traders from Abbasid caliphates, Frankish kingdoms, and Byzantine ports would haggle over noses, hair color, and health, sealing deals with coins stamped in distant mints. Supply and demand, dynamics, crop failures or wars increased the thrall supply and drove prices down. During harsh winters, masters might sell off thralls at bargain rates just to cut feeding costs. Conversely, a prosperous raid season could spike demand, leading to thrall booms where masters fought over the best captives, dusra, justifying slavery. Myths, laws, and lore. Vikings didn't enslave simply because they could. They wove a tapestry of beliefs to legitimize bondage. Divine sanction. Some Norse tales depicted thralls as descendants of Jotnar giants, cursed by the gods and hence fit for servitude. This myth painted slavery as cosmic order, not cruelty. Legal codes, Gragos, the Icelandic law book, detailed thrall rights, such as minimal food provision, and masters' privileges, absolute control over labor. The laws accepted slavery as a pillar of society, regulating it rather than condemning it. Cultural narratives. Sagas portrayed thralls as comic relief or loyal sidekicks, never as victims. Their suffering was background noise, reinforcing the idea that servitude was normal and even humorous. Moondrop. Distant destinies. Thralls abroad. Many thralls were sold far from home, forging unintended diasporas. From Scandinavia to Samarkand, caravan routes ferried thralls through Rus' territories to Khazar lands and beyond. In Central Asia, Norse-born slaves lived among Persians, sometimes rising as valued translators or mercenary guards. Their children blended Norse and local customs in surprising cultural fusions. The Byzantine Varangian Guard. Some thralls, after years in markets, were recruited into the elite Varangian Guard, bodyguards to the Byzantine emperor. While still slaves in name, they gained wealth, prestige, and rare opportunities to gain freedom through valor. Integration and assimilation. Thralls who married local women often assimilated, their descendants unaware of Viking origins. Archaeologists find Norse-style brooches in Scottish crofts and Slavic pottery in Swedish burial mounds, a testament to these human migrations. Nangavada, the 7 harshest punishments you've never heard of. Beyond branding and whipping, masters devised cruel torments to maintain order and deter escapees. The boar's snout restraint. A metal clamp forced open the mouth and clipped the nose, leaving thralls drooling and humiliated until they begged for mercy. The frostbite penalty. In winter, a recalcitrant thrall might be dunked into an ice hole, left until frost claimed fingers and toes as a warning to others. The sleep deprivation spike masters drove spikes along sleeping platforms. Thralls tossed all night to avoid impalement, resulting in delirium by dawn. The mirror of shame. A polished metal sheet forced upon thralls after confession. They had to stare at themselves and recount every transgression. Any pause meant another lash. The goat's breath gassed thralls trapped inside a hut filled with animal dung and heated rocks, inhaling choking fumes until sobbing for release. The family hostage auction. To punish escape attempts, masters seized thrall kin, selling them overseas to force the runaway into compliance or witness their family's dispersal. The ceremonial spike. For the most egregious offenses, thralls were impaled on wooden stakes in full view of the village, claimed as an offering to Odin, but mostly meant to recruit terror. Eindavde, religion, ritual, and the blot of bondage. Even faith reinforced slavery. Annual blots, sacrificial rites, featured thralls as offerings, literal or symbolic. The kindling of chains. At Yule, masters might burn a new set of manacles over the hearth, dedicating them to Loki to temper obedience. Thralls watched as the glowing metal promised bondage for another year. The Oath of Iron. During midwinter, thralls swore fealty on a heated sword. Failure meant a public binding under the hall's central pillar, where they'd remain shackled for days. Aravde. Cultural residue. Slavery's ghost in modern Scandinavia. Today's Nordic countries reckon with this past unevenly. Museums and memory sites such as Sweden's Birka now host exhibits on Viking slavery, but interpretive panels often sanitize the brutality in deference to tourism. Literary reckoning, Scandinavian authors like Sophie Oxenen tackle historical slavery in novels, blending fiction with archival research to confront the legacy of thrall life. Legal echoes, modern Swedish law once penalized denigration of people harshly, an uncomfortable echo of ancient codes protecting master's honor. Yeram, thralls in popular culture, from background extras to protagonists. A few bold creators center thrall perspectives. Video games, indie titles like Frostbind let players survive as thralls, forging escape plans and forging bonds with NPCs in frostbitten longhouses. Graphic novels, series such as Shackled Skies depict thrall rebellions with gritty realism, blood, frostbite, and fleeting hope rendered in stark black and white panels. Podcasts and audio dramas. Storytellers dramatize historic trials of thralls, blending saga fragments with scholarly commentary to give voices to the voiceless. That wraps up part 3 of Why It Sucked to Be a Viking Thrall, Slave. We've covered the grim economics, legal justifications, distant destinies, brutal punishments, and the lingering cultural echoes of thrallhood. In part 4, we'll explore the final act, how thralls sometimes clawed their way to power, the moral reckonings of modern Scandinavia, and the lessons this grim chapter of history holds for us today. Stay tuned, freedom and closure awaits in the next saga. The final chapter of your existence as a Viking thrall unfolds not in the longhouse or aboard a drakkar, but in the hidden reckonings of power, the grudging grants of freedom, and the lingering shadows your life casts into modern memory. Here, we explore the rare ascents from bondage to influence, the reluctant moral reckonings of Scandinavia's heirs, and the lessons slavish servitude etches into our shared humanity. First, from chains to command, thralls. Turned kings against all odds, a handful of thralls clawed their way to positions of authority, elevated not by birthright, but by cunning, courage, or divine whim. Their stories remind us that even the most broken human can spark a revolution of self. Havardr Bjornsson, the oarmaster of Ribe. Captured as a boy in a Jutland raid, Havr spent his youth rowing longships and hauling timber. By age 20, his sinewy arms and quick wit earned him the trust of his master's eldest daughter. Secretly, he learned Norse runes and the art of trade negotiation. When famine struck, Havdr organized the thralls into a cooperative, bartering firewood for grain. His master, impressed by the smooth operation, officially manumitted him, then appointed him chief foreman over both slaves and freemen, a position granting legal authority. Within years, Havdr had transformed the estate into a thriving port. Local sagas record him as the freed thrall who taught Denmark the coin of respect. Freydis, shield sister Arnadottir. When a neighboring chieftain invaded her master's land, thralls were ordered to dig ditches and heft stones. Freydis, a swift runner, volunteered to carry messages to reinforcements. She slipped through enemy lines, delivered the warning, then returned to finish her labor, ignoring the fury of her master. Though beaten and branded for insolence, Freydis's valor became legend. The chieftain rewarded her master with safe passage. Seeing the benefit of a loyal, capable envoy, the master freed Freydis and made her his right hand, negotiating peace treaties with other lords. She bore the title Shield Sister, forging alliances that reshaped Jutland's power map. Eric the Scribe. Most thralls never learned to read or write, but Eric, once owned by a wealthy Jarlsborg merchant, discovered old parchment scraps in a storeroom and taught himself runic letters. He began keeping household accounts, illuminating the herring trade's profits and losses. When pirates attacked and the Jarl was captured, Eric rallied the Longhouse's defenders by distributing written orders. His clear instructions turned panic into organized resistance. Impressed, the Jarl granted Eric freedom and appointed him Chancellor, the first man of Thrall birth entrusted with the realm's archives. Eric's ledgers survive as archaeological marvels, ink-stained proof that one man's thirst for letters can reshape destiny, the moral reckoning confronting a bloody legacy. Centuries later, modern Scandinavia grapples with its Viking past, once lauded for epic raids and fearless exploration. The same history now demands an honest accounting of the human suffering it entailed. Rewriting school books. In Iceland and Norway, curricula have shifted from heroic sagas to balanced examinations. Students study the economic importance of thrall labor alongside Norse mythology. Textbook chapters that once glorified Nut's conquests now include interviews with historians who detail living conditions in longhouses and the legal minutiae that sanctioned human property. Memorials to the enslaved. In 2018, Denmark unveiled a monument in Jelling, featuring a carved slab commemorating unnamed thralls, those whose labors bore the long ships and buildings we inherit. The text, written in both Danish and Old Norse runes, stands beside King Harold's runestone, a silent rebuke of the valor that came on the backs of the enslaved. Public apologies and reparations. Though far smaller in scale than other nations' reckonings, Swedish municipalities have issued formal apologies for medieval slave trading. In 2022, Hedeby's town council allocated funds for research into thrall graves, promising proper archaeological care and respectful reburial, a gesture that acknowledges the violation of countless anonymous lives. Moondram. Blood feuds turned healing rituals. The cycles of vengeance that once perpetuated Viking blood feuds have, in some pockets, transformed into healing rituals. Communities symbolically break the chains of the past rather than the necks of adversaries. The Chain-Breaking Festival. Each midsummer in Scania, townsfolk gather to forge and ceremonially shatter iron chains, evocative of the manacles that once bound thralls. Participants etch the names of historical thrall heroes onto the links and at twilight, smash them on granite stones. Bonfires light the square as descendants dance, recalling both the suffering endured and the freedom reclaimed. The Feast of Freed Hands. In Vestfold, a yearly feast features locally baked manacle cakes, shortbread rings tied with licorice ropes. Attendees wear wristbands of woven straw, symbolizing solidarity with the invisible bonds of history. During the meal, speakers recount tales of thralls who rose to prominence, casting the event as both remembrance and inspiration. Nangavde. Enduring lessons. What thrallhood teaches us today. Though the lash and the oar sit silent in museum display cases, the echoes of thrall servitude resonate in contemporary debates on human rights, labor exploitation, and the dignity of work. Migrant labor and debt bondage. Patterns of debt bondage among seasonal workers in modern citrus farms mirror medieval Nordic practices. Observers cite thrall systems when arguing for stronger international labor protections, pointing out that economic desperation has long fueled human commodification. Human trafficking awareness NGOs in Oslo and Stockholm reference Viking thralls in awareness campaigns, drawing parallels to contemporary human trafficking. Posters proclaim, "Slavery isn't ancient history, it's happening now," accompanied by stylized runic symbols to highlight the continuity of involuntary servitude. Tech platforms and digital peonage. Some scholars argue that algorithms enforcing gig economy labor quotas amount to a new form of thrallhood. They warn that without legal safeguards, digital workers may find themselves bound by contracts they cannot renegotiate, echoing the debt bondage clauses of Viking law. Eindaude. The haunting of old longhouse sites. Archaeological digs across Scandinavia unearth more than timber posts and charred beams. They reveal subtle traces of lives crushed under forced labor. Footprints in the hearth. Ash scanning longhouse hearth ash under infrared light. Researchers have mapped patterns of communal sleeping and cooking. Thin zones of ash indicate where thralls cramped next to pigs, while thicker deposits show where masters congregated, silent evidence of daily segregation. Hidden lockpicks and runic graffiti. In rural Rogaland, a dig uncovered a cache of flint lockpicks beneath a thrall's bedding niche, alongside a scratched rune spelling Freya, perhaps a prayer for liberation. These small artifacts humanized the anonymous, a thrall's secret prayer and plan etched in silence. DNA markers of assimilation. Genetic studies on coastal populations reveal unexpected Norse markers in southern Sweden and northern England, likely thralls who settled, married locals, and vanished into the historical record. Their bloodlines persist, invisible under modern surnames but present in every heartbeat. Araude, thrallhood and popular memory, film, literature, and art artists and writers continue to probe the horrors and heartbreak of Viking slavery, ensuring thralls' stories endure beyond academic journals. Blockbuster cinema, a forthcoming Netflix series, or an Oath, centers on a thrall-turned-adventurer who infiltrates a jarl's court. Early trailers promise unflinching depictions of longhouse life, lice, rat-infested rafters, and the terror of market day. Graphic novels. In Bonds of Dust, a Finnish artist juxtaposes vibrant battle scenes with monochrome panels of thrall daily drudgery. The contrast highlights the narrative gap between valorized warriors and the enslaved majority. Contemporary art installations. In Reykjavik, sculptor Sigríður Jónsdóttir unveiled Rows of Silence, a series of 500 carved oars arranged in a gallery. Visitors are invited to touch the oar handles, each inscribed with a thrall's name compiled from saga fragments, transforming anonymity into tangible remembrance. Yeram, closing the circle, the last words of a thrall. No saga ends without a final utterance, and though thralls left no runic autographs, their legacy speaks through our collective conscience. Imagine a whisper on the wind. We toiled in shadows so you might build halls of glory. We were the unseen hands that shaped your world, yet you never raised a stone in our honor. May our chains rest in dust, but our stories rise in song. Let every free man's oath include our names, and every ship's course cross seas of justice. As the embers of this tale fade, remember that the darkest corners of history demand our illumination. The next time you admire a longhouse reconstruction or cheer a Viking reenactment, spare a thought for the thrall whose sweat, blood, and stolen hope made such pageantry possible. The Viking thrall system may belong to the past, but its lessons endure, reminding us that freedom is never guaranteed. Dignity must be vigilantly defended, and the cost of human bondage is a debt owed to the living and the dead. May we repay it by speaking truth, honoring the voiceless, and forging a world where no one's worth is measured in silver, cattle, or chains. Imagine being stripped of your name, your clothes swapped for a coarse woolen smock, and locked behind towering brick walls lined with barred windows, where silence is broken only by distant sobs and the clank of iron doors. Welcome to life as a Victorian asylum patient. The day you arrive at St. Mortimer's Lunatic Asylum, or whatever cheerful name your nearest madhouse bore, begins with a coach ride that feels more like exile than transportation. A driver in a frock coat tips his hat as you're helped down the steps, your family staring with awkward shame, while porters in identical caps haul your trunk, whispering about another case. No one meets your eyes. First, the formal admission ritual. Your first stop is the reception hall, a cavernous room with a windowless vault of a ceiling, gas lamps flickering like cautious ghosts. A stern attendant leads you to a mahogany desk cluttered with ledgers and ink pots. He asks your name, age, occupation, and the precise nature of your madness. Every symptom is catalogued. Insomnia, 3 weeks. Hallucinations, 5 episodes. Mania, unquantified. You're offered no corrections. These men in sober coats record you as Exhibit A, an object, not a person. Once your details are logged, the attendant plucks a thick leather strap from a drawer and cinches it around your wrist like an oversized bracelet. If you feel unwell, ring twice, he instructs, tapping a brass bell on the desk. You nod, struggling to keep panic from your face. 2. The stripping of self. Next comes the wardrobe transition. Your day clothes, tailcoat, frock dress, circumferential crinoline, are replaced with a sack-like smock of blue wool. No buttons, no belts, just tie cords that chafe your skin. Linen drawers and undergarments are confiscated. The rationale: too much temptation for self-harm. You clutch the smock's coarse fabric, mourning the polite silhouette you once wore. Your pockets are emptied. A small keepsake, a locket or a rosary, is pocketed by the nurse, its owner unsure when or if it will return. You're told these objects cause agitation, but suspect they'd sooner guard diamonds than a prayer card in these halls. Moondrum. First impressions. The dormitory. A narrow corridor leads to the dormitory. Long rows of iron bedsteads, mattresses so thin you feel every link of the frame. Some beds stand empty, others hold bodies huddled under scratchy blankets. Faces peer up at you, some dawn bright, others blank as tombstones. A chandelier of dripping metal hangs in the center, its glow failing to reach the far corners. Each patient receives a tin chamber pot beneath their bed. There's no privacy. When you relieve yourself, neighbors watch without shame. The smell of stale urine, disinfectant, and boiled cabbage, today's supper, wafts in the air. You find a bed, place your few possessions in a small shelf at the foot, and lie awake, listening to the groans and whispered prayers of the others. Nan Gavda, the asylum schedule, clockwork of despair. At precisely 6 a.m., a shrill bell clatters through the corridors. You and the other patients must rise, wash from a communal basin, and stand in nightclothes for inspection. Any disheveled hair or untied smock draws a sharp rebuke from the attendants. By 6:30, you're herded to the dining hall. Meals are served in silence. Noon porridge, thin and lukewarm, fills chipped enamel bowls. Dinner at 5 p.m. is boiled meat, overcooked to the consistency of rubber, and potatoes with skin intact. It's more nourishing, they claim. A supernumerary cup of weak tea is passed around. Sugar is rationed to 1 cube per patient per day. Conversation is discouraged. Those who speak risk time in solitary. After dinner, there's recreation, often consisting of sitting motionless in a fenced courtyard, watched by a guard with a loaded pistol. A solitary tree stands in the center, its branches as bare as the faces behind the fence. Patients are allowed to pace for an hour, too cold for comfort in winter, too hot in summer. No toys, no books, no music, just an endless circle of your own thoughts and the guard's unblinking stare. Eindavde. Treatments. Bathing in irony. Victorian medicine touted treatments that read like torture. Cold water. Therapy. You're strapped to a wooden board and submerged in a tiled tank of frigid water for up to 20 minutes. They call it tonic, but your teeth chatter like castanets. Wet sheet packs. Soaked linens are wrapped around you, then sealed in blankets, ostensibly to subdue mania by cooling the blood. Though patients often awaken disoriented, shaking, or worse. The reconditioning room, a padded cell with no windows, for safety. You're left there for hours in silence, forced to confront your own terror. Electric shock devices. Early experiments involve passing mild currents through your temples, aiming to reset the mind. The apparatus crackles ominously, and you wonder if your sanity will follow the path of least resistance. Aravda, the dark side of kindness. Some attendants are gentle, offering a kind word or a piece of chalk to scrawl verses on the walls, but their compassion is strictly limited. Show any sign of agitation, and they call the orderlies, 2 men with leather gloves and industrial restraint belts, who will pin you down and administer forceful treatment. Meanwhile, families visit once a month, peering through thick glass in the visiting parlor. They wave, mouths moving, but never ask how you sleep, what you dream, or if the cold water therapy gives you nightmares. You realize they don't want a person back. They want the memory of who you were, sanitized and safe. 7. The mental toll. Day after day of identical routine, you begin to lose track of time. Clocks hang on every wall, their hands creaking in perfect unison, ticking off the monotony. Your mind becomes as regimented as the schedule. Eat, march, endure treatment, sleep, repeat. You dream of freedom, walking on a sunny lane, touching real linen, hearing laughter unguarded by clinical smiles. But each morning you wake in the dormitory, your smock damp with sweat, the iron rails cold beneath your head. That wraps up part 1 of our 4-part journey into Victorian asylum life. We've covered admission, daily routine, living conditions, and the infamous treatments that blurred the lines between healing and torture. In part 2, we'll explore the stories of 3 real patients, their diagnoses, delusions, and the surprising ways they resisted. Plus, the subterranean tunnels beneath the asylum, secret notes scrawled in the walls, and the one rebellion that shook St. Mortimer's to its foundations. See you soon, assuming they don't discharge me for too much complaining. Imagine sneaking down a dim corridor at midnight, guided only by the echo of your own footsteps and the faint drip of water on stone walls, where every rat's squeak could be an attendant's footsteps and every shadow could hide a patient bent on escape. Welcome back to the hidden horrors of Victorian asylums. 1. 3 patients, 3 nightmares. Let's meet the souls whose stories slip between ledger lines. Eleanor, the songbird, Haversham diagnosis and arrival. Eleanor, a genteel governess, admitted after singing non-stop for days, believing her lullabies could ward off the end of the world. At St. Mortimer's, her voice went from blessing to burden. Descent into the music box. Nurses placed her in the music room, a locked chamber with no piano, and fed her laudanum until her melodies stuttered into mutters. She penned scraps of lyric on the walls with dried blood from her fingertips. Sing, sweet light, sing me free. Resistance and escape attempt. One stormy night, Eleanor jammed a hairpin into a faulty lock, her bare feet echoing on stone as she darted through the darkness toward a bricked-up side tunnel. Guards found her at dawn, soaked and shivering, clutching a shard of paving stone. She returned to her cot, humming a new tune, one no one else could hear. Samuel the calculator, Pritchard diagnosis and arrival. A former accountant, Samuel's mania arrived as incessant arithmetic, adding passers-by's ages, multiplying floor tiles, dividing ration cups into impossible fractions. He terrified staff by demanding precise porridge measurements to 4 decimal places. Life in the numbers cage. He was confined to a padded calm room with walls painted in checkerboard patterns, his every movement recorded in a ledger. Guards wore mittens to avoid his frantic counting of their knuckles. Secret rebellion. Samuel carved logarithms into his chair, proof of mathematical brilliance. Late at night, he'd slip a piece of chalk through the door's narrow slot, leaving numeric puzzles on the corridor walls. Patients whispered his sequences aloud, momentarily freeing their minds from bleak reality. C. Agatha, the shadow, Bellamy diagnosis and arrival. Agatha believed she was invisible, an affliction that began after witnessing a carriage accident. She removed her dress and slipped through ward doors, convinced no one could see her. Life among the unseen. Nurses dressed her in a patched smock too large to wrap around her frame. She sat on the periphery of every group, her voice fading into whispered pleas. Am I here? Unexpected heroism. During a fire in the attic, Agatha slipped behind the blazing rafters unnoticed, guiding trapped patients toward an emergency exit. Staff found her crawling back, soot-streaked and exhausted. They lifted her to bed, stunned by the rescue. For days, other patients whispered, "The shadow saved us," reclaiming a shred of dignity in the asylum's gloom. Dusra. The subterranean tunnels beneath St. Mortimer's lay a labyrinth of brick-arched passageways, built to ferry coal, water, and some say, forbidden souls. Origins and purpose. Constructed in 1865, these tunnels connected the boiler room, the chapel, and a hidden chapel crypt. Officially for maintenance, unofficially for smuggling laudanum and contraband letters. Secret messages. Patients discovered loose bricks behind a collapsed coal chute and carved their names onto tunnel walls, tiny hieroglyphs of despair. Mary P., 1872, still singing. John R., still counting. Midnight gatherings. A handful of braver souls held whispered meetings here, forging fragile camaraderie. By lantern light, they plotted to abscond through the service exit out to the canal beyond, only to find the final door bricked shut by orderlies long ago. 3. Scrawled notes and hidden pleas. The walls themselves became patient journals, chamber pot graffiti. On the underside of chamber pot lids, frantic pleas appeared. Remember me. Tell mother I love her. The water tastes like metal. Help. When attendants replace pots, they flush these cries away, leaving heartbreak behind. Stairwell lyrics. In one stairwell, Eleanor's blood-penned verses persisted, "Sing, sweet light." Later patients added responses beneath her words in pencil, and set us free. A silent duet through years of suffering. Attendant annotations. Some kinder attendants annotated these scrawls in neat ink, adding dates and small crosses, an unspoken acknowledgement that they saw these patients as people, not numbers. Nangavda, the one great rebellion. In 1883, the whispered rumor of freedom ignited a singular uprising. The catalyst, a new charismatic patient, an ex-soldier named Harold Drake, claimed he could overpower any orderly. Word spread like wildfire. Tonight we march. The night of clattering chains. Dozens of patients seized wheelchairs and bedpans as weapons, rattling them against iron doors. They burst into the central hall, chanting, "Out! Out!" Their hoarse voices echoed among oil lamps. Brief triumph. For 10 chaotic minutes, the asylum gate stood open. Patients streamed onto the lawn under a full moon, smelling the scent of freedom in the air. Bloody denouement. Within moments, orderlies, aided by local constables, corralled the escapees. Harold Drake was subdued with a prod of a pitchfork. Others staggered back, too stunned to resist. In the aftermath, every participant endured 14 days in solitary and extra cold water immersions. Drake himself was confined in the reconditioning room for a month. When he emerged, his spirit was broken, his voice never found again. Eindaude, the aftermath and legacy, official inquiry. Local newspapers reported a disturbance at St. Mortimer's. Families swore never to speak of it. The asylum's board ordered stricter locks and new regulations banning any midnight wanderings. Secret triumph, yet the rebellion left a mark. More patients whispered solidarity, passing notes in code. Some nurses quietly loosened restraints during nighttime rounds, granting patients moments of solace. Architectural reminders, decades later, when St. Mortimer's closed, the tunnels were filled in, except one short corridor left intact as a historical exhibit. Visitors today find walls etched with ghostly carvings, silent echoes of that one night when patients reached for the moon. That's part 2 of what it was like to be a Victorian asylum patient. We've met 3 unforgettable souls, explored hidden tunnels, deciphered wall scrawls, and witnessed the one great rebellion that cracked the asylum's facade. In part 3, we'll dive into the doctor's notebooks, case histories, experimental treatments, and the scandalous medical debates that rage behind closed doors. Plus, the secret garden of reason and how it became a final resting place for broken minds. See you then, if the attendants don't catch me scribbling on the walls first. Picture a Victorian doctor stroking his beard over a glass jar of preserved brains, proclaiming, "This one's a genius. Let's see if electricity proves it." Now imagine you're the guinea pig. Welcome back to the madhouse. First, the doctor's notebooks, portals to morbid curiosity. Within St. Mortimer's medical wing, a cadre of physicians meticulously documented every twitch, sob, and wild claim. Their notebooks brimmed with Latin diagnoses, curious case studies, and rivalries waged in ink. Dr. Bartholomew Clegg's Catalogue of Crazes. Clegg divided madness into 32 types, from melancholia nocturna, nighttime despair, to erotico sporadicus, public love letters spelled in blood. He recorded patient number 154's confession. "I am a spirit trapped in a teacup," next to a detailed sketch of a cracked porcelain cup he'd confiscated. Clegg believed that dissecting the artifact might unlock cosmic truths. Dr. Harriet Fenwick's Treatise on Female Hysteria. One of the few women in her field, Fenwick argued hysteria was wrongly pathologized. She noted that most patients, women from genteel families, suffered under the weight of propriety, not brain disease. Her scathing margin note, "Someday they'll call this oppression." Her book was quietly shelved after several colleagues accused her of undermining moral order. Dr. Percival Thorncroft's Electric Mind Experiments. Thorncroft rigged a contraption of light in jars and copper wires to deliver sparks to patients' temples. Journals describe flashes of lucidity interrupted by convulsions and screams. One entry reads, "Subject A trembled, declaring, 'I see the railway to the moon. Recommend further trials.'" The device sat in a steam-powered trolley, rolled from ward to ward in pursuit of Victorian EEG. 2. Experimental treatments, brave medicine, or unbridled torture. If the asylums were theaters, the treatments were the main act. Part cure, part spectacle. Morphia and laudanum cocktails. Every afternoon, attendants dispensed spoonfuls of laudanum-laced broth. Patients slid into dreamy stupors or sank into near coma. The goal, gentle sedation. In practice, it bred addiction, blurred memories, and made every waking hour a struggle to recall one's own name. Fever, shrinking chambers. Inspired by naval surgeons, doctors built steam-heated rooms to induce fevers in melancholic patients. Locked inside for hours, bodies sweated profusely, but no one noted whether the hot flush cured depression or simply torched healthy neurons. Electrical galvanic baths. Patients reclined in metal-lined tubs as low-voltage currents tingled through the water. Some reported renewed vigor, others claimed their limbs danced without consent. Thorncroft's notebooks cite one patient who sparked like a human lantern when the polarity reversed. The dancing cure. Borrowed from Parisian spas, this regimen forced patients into polka and waltz sessions under guard. Attendants belted orders from a ledger. Left foot, Misilac salute, do not falter. Those who collapsed were carried off to the padded cell, labeled dance ill in yet another classification. 3. The great medical debates. Asylum versus Society Beyond Wards. Heated polemics raged at medical societies and in the pages of The Lancet. Moral insanity versus organic disease. Dr. Clegg championed organic brain lesions as the root cause, advocating autopsies on every deceased patient. Contrarily, Dr. Fenwick argued for social determinants, lamenting that pauper families paid for sins of poverty. Their letters to medical journals filled dozens of pages, each side accusing the other of quackery. Electricity versus hypnosis. The arrival of mesmerist-influenced hypnotists threatened Thorncroft's experiments. Showmen entered wards, swinging pocket watches and chanting. Some patients awoke calm, refusing electrodes. Thorncroft branded hypnosis dangerous charlatanism, while hypnotists countered that his shocks bordered on cruelty. Debates culminated in a public demonstration. One doctor convulsed on stage after a current surge, tarring the profession's reputation. Restraints, necessity or neglect, leather straps and straitjackets were standard. A 1878 parliamentary inquiry decried unnecessary brutality, forcing asylums to adopt moral treatment, fresh air, gardens, and gentler oversight. St. Mortimer's planted its so-called Garden of Reason, but old habits died slowly. Nangavda, the Garden of Reason, green refuge or final abode. Conceived as therapeutic paradise, this walled garden was equal parts sanctuary and snare. Design and intent, manicured lawns, rose arbors, and a winding path promised patients a taste of Eden. Daily strolls aimed to restore sanity through nature's calm. Olive trees and exotic blooms, brought by wealthy patrons, lined a central fountain engraved with mens sana in corpore sano. Hidden agendas. Unbeknownst to most, the garden sat above the asylum's communal burial pit. Every winter, a nearby gate allowed discreet removal of the deceased, patients whose names faded from records. Strolling amidst the lilies, visitors unknowingly walked atop the fallen. Patient stories. Eleanor Haversham once carved her last verse on a rose trellis before vanishing into the crypt. Samuel Pritchard wrote logarithms in the soil with a stick, plotting cosmic equations that grew cold. Agatha Bellamy pressed her palms to the fountain's rim, believing its waters rendered her invisible, until she slipped and fractured her wrist. 5. Scandals. Behind closed doors. Despite reforms, the asylum harbored grim secrets. The cadaver controversy. In 1885, a whistleblower claimed that fresh corpses were sold to anatomy schools. Dr. Clegg's ledger detailed 30 bodies transferred under anonymity. The ensuing uproar forced a temporary closure of the dissecting theater, but the practice quietly resumed under a new code, patient boarding scheme. Wealthy families sometimes boarded inconvenient relatives under false pretenses. An audit revealed 3 MPs had paid to confine estranged siblings. Parliament vetoed asylum admissions without external physicians' approval. Yet clandestine placements persisted through private clinics. Attendant misconduct investigations uncovered a ring of orderlies who traded patient letters for illicit tobacco. The missing posts left families in anguish, and several attendants vanished under suspicious circumstances, some say smuggled into the catacombs below. 6. Resilience and resistance, patient legacies. Even within cruelty, flickers of human spirit endured. The Whisper Club, a small group of patients covertly met in the garden's summer house. They shared memories of home, exchanged poems stolen from discarded newspapers, and devised coded alphabets carved into bench slats. Their composer, a young woman named Clara, who taught them braille-like dots in the soil. Buried testaments. On stormy nights, patients wrote letters in candle soot on the back of wardrobe doors. One read, "To the world outside, remember us beyond the brick." A century later, restoration workers found these messages, stirring descendants to reclaim family histories. Art from agony. Rejecting straitjackets, some patients fashioned papier-mâché masks from discarded medical pamphlets. These masks, eerily expressive, hung in the attic until the asylum's closure. Today they reside in a museum exhibit titled Faces of Sanity, a testament to creation born of confinement. That concludes part 3 of what it was like to be a Victorian asylum patient. We've delved into doctors' obsessions, brutal experiments, public scandals, and the quiet rebellion blooming beneath manicured lawns. In part 4, we'll unearth the asylum's final days, closure proceedings, patient fates, and how St. Mortimer's ghosts linger in modern mental health care. See you soon, if they don't commit me for overzealous note-taking. Picture the grand doors of St. Mortimer's swinging closed for the last time, dust settling on iron bars, petals wilting in the garden of reason while ghosts of patience wander empty halls. Welcome to the final chapter of life behind asylum walls, and the messy aftermath that still haunts modern mental health. 1. The dawn of closure. When walls finally came down, by the early 1900s, Victorian asylums faced mounting criticism. Reports of abuse, scandals in the Lancet, and families demanding answers forced governments to act. St. Mortimer's, once a model institution, was no exception. The Parliamentary Inquiry of 1907, a special committee toured the asylum, tallying fresh grievances. They found solitary cells that hadn't seen a patient in decades, proof that unused didn't mean unused appropriately. The Garden of Reason's burial pit was exposed, leading to public outcry. Newspapers ran headlines like "Where Roses Bloom Above Tombstones" and "Patients Buried in Plain Sight." Legislative overhaul. The subsequent Lunacy Reform Act of 1908 mandated humane treatment, compulsory external oversight, and patient rights. Asylum boards raced to retrofit padded cells with windows, replace straitjackets with soft restraints, and install telephone lines for emergency calls by patients. Though many old attendants feared patients might dial for midday tea deliveries. Final patient transitions. In 1910, the remaining 120 patients at St. Mortimer's were assessed one by one. Those deemed recoverable, often those with nervous exhaustion or mild melancholy, were gradually escorted home or transferred to care homes. The chronically ill, including Samuel, the calculator Pritchard, whose arithmetic mania persisted, were moved to smaller institutions with therapeutic communities rather than brick fortresses. A handful, like Agatha, the Shadow Bellamy, never left. Her records note lifelong residency under evolving care models. Second post-closure echoes, a building's second life, after the last patient departed in December 1912. St. Mortimer's stood silent until it found its next purpose, World War I hospital. In 1915, the War Office repurposed the dormitories to treat shell-shock sufferers and wounded soldiers. Old padded cells became restrooms for shell-shocked officers whose nerves frayed under enemy fire. Nurses trained in asylum methods sometimes applied water therapies, now to treat trauma rather than madness. The Garden of Reason hosted troop morale dances amid the rose arbors once pressed by forgotten patients. Conversion to a teacher training college. By 1923, educational reformers eyed the sturdy brick complex for a normal school. Lecture halls replaced the chapel. The tunnels once used for coal delivery became student study nooks, sealed entrances hidden behind bookshelves. Iron bedsteads gave way to wooden desks, though tales circulated of chairs creaking on their own in empty classrooms at dusk. Abandonment and decay. The college closed in the 1970s, and the sprawling estate fell into disrepair. Vines strangled walls. Broken windows gaped like dead eyes. Local children dared each other to slip through barred gates and catch a glimpse of the overgrown courtyard, strewn with rusting wheelchairs and peeling paint. Moondrum. Hauntings and heritage. Ghost tours and preservation. In the 1990s, paranormal enthusiasts rediscovered St. Mortimer's, sparking a revival. Ghost tours. A local entrepreneur bought the property, offering candlelit night walks. Encounter Eleanor's lullaby in the corridor, the brochure promised, and hear Dr. Thorncroft's electricity crackle in the silence. Tourists flocked, cameras set to infrared, only to record faint silhouettes drifting behind collapsed doors. Heritage battles. Preservationists argued against complete renovation, citing Grade 2 listing status. They fought plans to convert the site into luxury flats, insisting, "We must honor the memories of those interned here." Campaigns raised funds to stabilize crumbling wings and clear vegetation from the Garden of Reason, now a memorial park with steel. Plaques listing patient names drawn from surviving registers. 4. Modern mental health. Lessons from St. Mortimer's. The asylum's grim legacy informs today's psychiatric care. Patient rights and consent. The involuntary commitments of Victorian times taught us the horrors of unchecked authority. Modern mental health laws require informed consent for treatment, regular review tribunals, and patient advocates, guarding against abuse reminiscent of straitjacket lockdowns and forced cold packs. Therapeutic environments. From the padded cells of old, we've moved to open wards with daylight, communal lounges, and private therapy rooms. Nature therapy, once a derided garden of reason, now underpins programs sending patients to actual gardens, farms, and wilderness retreats to heal, through contact with living plants, not dead burial pits. Medication and ethics morphia and laudanum cocktails have been replaced by evidence-based psychotropics, prescribed under strict oversight. Lessons learned from addiction and sedation abuses in asylums demand careful dosing, monitoring, and patient education to prevent new forms of chemical control. Holistic and community care. The isolation of long corridors, once echoing with despair, gave way to community mental health teams. Patients live in supported housing or with peer support groups, rather than brick institutions. Care plans focus on employment, relationships, and personal goals, rejecting the custody model that defined St. Mortimer's. Ainda remembering the stones, memorializing patient voices. To avoid erasing suffering, scholars and activists ensure voices from asylum registers speak again. Oral history projects. Descendants of patients like Eleanor Haversham recorded interviews recounting family lore. The lullabies, the midnight escape, the haunting verses on the stairwell. These narratives populate online archives, bridging the gap between dry casebooks and human experience. Digital reconstructions using 3D modeling. Historians recreated St. Mortimer's as it stood in 1880. Virtual reality tours guide viewers through restored dormitories and the original paddling pool. Once for hydrotherapy, now a 360-degree reminder of misguided innovation. Art and performance playwrights and artists stage readings of Dr. Fenwick's dissenting margins, enacting scenes from notebooks side by side with patient graffiti. Installations project ghostly images of masks made from medical pamphlets onto asylum walls at night, transforming sites of horror into canvases of remembrance. As the sun sets on these final brick corridors, we close the ledger on St. Mortimer's, but not on its lessons. Victorian asylums taught us that good intentions can mask cruelty, that innovation without ethics becomes torture, and that every patient deserves dignity, voice, and choice. So next time you pass a mental health clinic, spare a thought for the hundreds confined in smocks and straitjackets, the voices muffled by lead pipes and brick. Remember Eleanor's song that no one could unhear, Samuel's equations etched in stone, Agatha's silent rescue, and the countless others whose names faded from sight but not from history. Thanks for journeying through this nightmare with me. Drop a comment with the treatment you'd least like to endure, or the patient story you found haunting. And until our next dark dive, may your mind remain free, your voice unshackled, and your empathy undimmed. Slán agus bea nacht.